Good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us to the May 30th, 2022 Board of Education meeting. We'll start off in a good way with our acknowledgement of our traditional territories, and that is the Greater Victoria School District wishes to acknowledge and recognize the Esquimalt and Songhees nations on whose traditional territories we live, we learn, and we do our work. And because I'm zooming in from a different location, I also want to acknowledge the lands which constitute the present-day city of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas with the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Wyandot Nations. We recognize these people and their ancestors as people who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda for this evening? Moved by Tom, seconded by Trustee Whitaker. Is there any amendments to the agenda? Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. I would like to add a board report, please.
Yes, board report. So C2A, Trustee Whitaker board report. Any other amendments? I think we can, does anyone have challenges to that amendment? That way we don't have to approve the amendment and then approve. Okay, I see no challenges, so we'll just approve that. So the agenda approval, all those in favor, please signify. And that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Approval of April 25th regular board meeting minutes. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Moved by Jordan, seconded by Elaine. Any discussion? Trustee Duncan and then Trustee Whitaker. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just have a suggested amendment on page 9 of the packet. It kind of goes in from page 9 into 10 under C1C. And the amendment would start after on page 10 after the word when. So assigned to the committee when, and it would read, when trustee membership is usually rotated on an annual basis, and the current trustees assigned are going into their 3rd year on the policy committee. And would
hey, Elaine, sorry, I was on mute. Just before we move on, Elaine's hand went up right away, so I just want to, before we move forward, Elaine.
Just it doesn't say that in the policy. That was a suggestion, but that's not in the policy that they rotate every year. So just if we're trying to keep the minutes according to policy, that's not what the policy says.
Chair, if I may, so just to clarify my amendment. So the minutes should reflect, in my view, the concern that I raised, which is that the board's practice had previously been to rotate trustees on an annual basis. And in this instance, I raised the issue because the trustees assigned were going into a 3rd year. So I just want the minutes to accurately reflect what my concern was.
Yeah, Trustee Duncan, thank you, Elaine, for the comment and reminding us what the policy says. I appreciate Trustee Duncan wants the minutes to reflect her own concerns as they are, not necessarily in relation to policy, but in relation to practice. So I have no concerns with that, Trustee Duncan. Did you have anything further to add on that?
Only just a clarification that the words all other changes were made in December would just be removed.
Okay, are there any concerns with that, trustees? All other changes, having that removed? I don't have any, so. Okay, so that is there, and I'm assuming there's no opposition to that, so we can just accept that. Trustee Whitaker, I know you're next. Go ahead.
Sorry, so I'm just reflecting an email that we received earlier from Jonathan Fairber that says that the question that he asked in question period is missing. So I just wanted to relay that we need to insert that he sent a question at 7:55. Anyway, so John I don't know how to say his last name for anything.
Farber.
Thank you. Has commented that his question was omitted from the draft minutes, so I think those should be inserted.
Yeah, thanks, Trustee Whitaker. Can either Deb or Kim comment on that? And let us know about that piece in the minutes and just bring us up to speed.
Sure, I can. So there were a few questions from Mr. Farber in the morning. We can't see anything in the community inbox or the question period email at 7:55 p.m. We do see one around, I think, 10 something, and that was asked and answered at the meeting. And as far as we know, the 11 o'clock AM morning questions were answered. So we're not sure what the 7:55 question was because we can't see it in question period.
Trustee Whitaker, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So are all of his questions asked and answers, are they in the minutes? Just I wouldn't know.
So the point is, I believe, and trust Kim, if I'm wrong, please answer, that there were questions submitted by email which were answered. The question that's being referred to on the board agenda that Mr. Farber is referring to cannot be found or determined at this point. So it wasn't asked in the meeting, and it seems to have not been answered. Kim, do I have that right? That we don't have his question that he's referring to from 7:55, or am I
Yeah, we can't find a question from 7:55 p.m. And of the questions we do have from Mr. Farber, we believe they've all been answered.
So they're answered in the minutes and they're answered by email previously, if they have been answered and submitted. Yeah, okay. Trustee Whitaker?
Thank you. So just noting that obviously we received an email where Jonathan believes that he did send one. Did we ask him to resend that question for this evening's meeting?
He is welcome to. I have not gotten to that point yet. I've only just received a follow-up from staff on his question because staff were hunting down the thread to find it, which was rather lengthy. So we've discovered it. He's welcome to submit a question this evening, or there are opportunities next month if you would like to submit the question again.
So can we just follow up with this member of the public to say that?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I will follow up with him. Okay, any further comments or questions on the minutes? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor of the minutes from April 25th? Any opposed? None opposed. That is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. We'll go to community presentations, and we'll start with Bruce Bidney, Principal, Spectrum, Turf, and Rink Star Committee. Bruce, you have 5 minutes. I won't interrupt you, but I'll let you know when we wind down, and I'll let you finish your thoughts. So Bruce, over to you. Welcome.
Hey, welcome. Oh, welcome to us. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us here this evening. I think Andy out there is going to be running our slides. Thanks, Andy. I get to do that great job of going next slide, please. That's going to be great. But yeah, we're really excited. It's been about a year since we've last been able to come in front of the trustees here and talk about our exciting STAR committee and our project here. We've had a few exciting updates to share. We have a few to share with you tonight. I'm joined this evening by Ian Sander and Audrey Smith, and so the three of us will be speaking. And I'm going to start off by just saying, again, thank you for giving us this opportunity. We've got a very excited group here tonight, and yeah, we're excited to be able to share where we're at. And hopefully at the end, we'll be giving an email out where we'll offer the trustees an opportunity to ask us any questions at a later date before we make our return to the June ops meeting. Yeah, so and Andy, if we could get the next slide, please. First off, again, out of a little bit of an historical journey that we've been on. I've been here at Spectrum for 4 years now, over 4 years, and this has been about a 5-year journey. We've come a long way. We were called STAR at first because we were the Spectrum. We had the dream of having an ice rink and 2 turfs, and now we're down to 1 turf. But we have lots of reasons why this is come to fruition, and we're excited about this. One thing that we really left, and we've had many meetings here with the board and district staff, Kim, Chuck, Marnie, and where we're starting to land is the real issue of environmental impact. And we've looked at wanting the ability to preserve green space. This is a beautiful area around our school, and it is very important to us too to maintain that that green land as well. And so we've got to a place where we feel comfortable with facilities, our district team, and this is where we've landed with this conceptual design that Ian will speak to later. We've also, just as a little exciting aside, we did our grade 8 transition day a few Thursdays ago, and it was so exciting to share our little turf design with all the grade 8s, the incoming students. And we actually got the loudest cheer of the day, even more than the one when I got up on stage. They were actually louder about the turf and excited that they might be the first group to experience such a facility. So we are really excited here. As you can see, the overview, $2.2 million project, stakeholder-based, no cost to the district, wanting to build upon the agreement in principle that we did land with the board, and we're looking to further move further with this agreement in principle. We've also worked with Kim, Chuck, Marnie to get us where we are today. And again, we really have appreciated the support, and we really truly feel like we're working together as a team. And we're looking to move into a formalization with SD61 in June. And that's what I alluded to before, how we would like to be at the June ops meeting to discuss this further. Next slide, please, Andrew. Just a little bit of where we're at with our stakeholders and supporters. Our longest serving stakeholder has been Vancouver Island Soccer League, and they continue to work with us. We've got the Victoria Spartans Football Association and the Greater Victoria Minor Football Association coming in with us as well now, which is really exciting. And this was a new development in the last 6 months or so. And we've actually got those two crosstown rivals working together and to join us on this venture. And it really speaks volumes to the community and the work that we can all do together. And it goes along well with our guiding principles as a committee, that we feel that we are very community based. We also are joined by Ian and his company McElhaney, and they are working with us with an in-kind giving back to the community piece as well. And we've also wanted to make sure we recognize that we are on the traditional Algonquin territories, and we are going to be looking at building on this land. And so we also have received letters of support from the Songhees, and we continue to work with our people of the land, and the importance of working together to build a truly amazing project. Next slide, please. We also just wanted to display our legal structure. So the land, as you can see at top, is owned by SD61. We also have SD61 and the Vancouver Island Soccer League establishing a joint use agreement, and the VISL established joint use agreement with other stakeholders. So if you look at the chart there, we have Spartans, the Greater Victoria Minor Football League, and then we have the potential for other stakeholders to join us as we build momentum here. Next slide, please. And the joint use agreement was in draft. We've worked with Kim on this as well, speaking how we could co-construct a use agreement modeled with consideration and similarities with the pre-existing Oak Bay High and Bays United joint use agreement. And this will be sent out to trustees before our June meeting at Ops. Next slide, please.
Got about 30 seconds left, Bruce.
Oh, no, look at that. Okay, so we're going to move over to Ian. And without further ado,
Thanks, Bruce. Ian, we'll go to you next, and same goes for you. I will set my timer for 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when you're about wrapped up and you can finish. But Ian, over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time or including us on your agenda tonight. Just a little background. My name is Ian Sander. I work for a company called McElhaney Engineering, and we have a number of staff who are a big part of Vancouver Island Soccer Association, or Soccer League, and so they were donating time and kind to help develop concepts and such. And then they asked me. I look after our local office here, and actually I went to Spectrum. I graduated in 1990, and we've got our annuals in the cabinet right beside me, which is kind of nice. This project really aligns with what McElhaney does here, and we've got this McElhaney Cares program. So we're committed to supporting this project because it aligns with our community values. We've got staff that live and work and play in this area, and it just lines up with our health and mental health, physical health, EDI objectives, everything. So it's a real great project for us to be part of. So what we did was to now, we worked with the Vancouver Island Soccer League, Greater Victoria Minor Football League, the Spartans, Spectrum faculty and facilities. And we developed a layout here, and what you see on the screen, what it is it's a FIFA regulation size soccer field, but it also includes an NFL football field, dual use inside of it. And we've located it such that, some of the goals were to maximize green space available at the end. We kind of wanted to minimize costs, of course. We wanted to make sure that there was lots of room for future improvements should there be other uses that the school district or other folks want to use here. Had to be close to parking. But fundamentally, that's it. And we've come up with this layout that meets all those criteria, but in concert with these stakeholders that Bruce had spoken about. As part of this exercise, we also met with Saanich. We do a lot of work with and for Saanich to talk to them about what kind of permitting would be required. And so fundamentally, none. We are going to be just adding lights. We're going to be using it for the same use it is right now, although it'll be more usable. Obviously, a lot more hours can be played here. So all we really need is a building permit for the lighting. So I guess that's about it. And so we'll be looking forward to questions from you folks. And so we'll be sending out an email address where if you have any more detailed questions, technical questions, we'd be happy to answer those. But fundamentally, that's it. Actually, could you go to the next couple of slides? Actually, the next slide. We just did some renderings to show what this would look like. Obviously, we got some large fences to make sure that we're not going to be kicking soccer balls out in the street. You can see we've got the lighting there. You can see that it'll be dual use both with the football and with the soccer. And if you could go the next slide again, please. And there it is in context with the overall site with the neighborhood. So I think I'm good, Mr. Painter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. That was very good. We'll now move on to James Poston, Spectrum Turf and Rink Star Committee. James, you have 5 minutes. I'll let you know when you're roughly near the end and let you wrap up.
I'm James's stand-in.
Oh, hi.
I'm Audrey Smith. For those of you who don't know me, I think that's not very many of you. So James is our financial consultant, and he's on the committee and has been for years now. And he has prepared these 2 financial documents that give you an overview of what we're looking at. Our numbers are more fine-tuned than they were the last time we presented financials to the board. We've had, Ian has helped a fair bit with helping us understand the costs other than materials. And so this number is how we've come to the $2.2 million. And James had some talking points here. There is some cushion in that with the contingency, as you can see the last line on that, on the cost and items, the cost items chart. We've got $270,000 as our contingency. And then the funding sources that are committed at this moment in time have committed almost $1 million. We've got 44% committed. And then we have grants potential with those groups that are committed. They can also apply for grants that would go towards this field. Once we get to a more formalized agreement, they'll be able to be eligible for them. We found that the grant applications want it to be a project that is in progress and has a completion date. And the in-kind donations, so we have several community members who have the ability to do in-kind donations and helping in the construction part or in the development of the materials that we'll need or labor. So we would be able to give you more detailed information on that if you desire more detailed information. But that amount, we are confident that once this has gone more public, that it's actually a project that is a go, that has a green light, that we will be able to complete the fundraising. The other chart is to give us a financial forecast for being able to maintain the field and replace it as it ages. And as you can see, this is a 27-year chart. It does it in 11-year increments for a bit there. And at the 10-year mark is when we anticipate we would need to have about $500,000 to put into the field. And as you can see, we would have a surplus. This is with the rental revenues going into the field maintenance fund. And so we anticipate with rental rates being only incrementally changed over the years, but right now we've got them set at what the industry norm is. And so this was we're being fairly conservative with our rentals, leaving at least, there was a good percentage that was unclaimed hours for the field. So that number could go up. So that was, that's the financials that we have before you, for you to be able to look at. And if there are questions that arise from that, we are prepared. We want to be prepared to answer those. So in the future, in June, hopefully. My conclusion is, for the presentation here, is that we are currently working on your motion of a support in principle that is set to expire in October. And we have come a long way, but we can't get any farther. The donations that we have pledged are not able to be deposited into the school district account because it's still just a support in principle, not a project. And so we have money that is hanging around that we'd like to be able to access, to be able to actually go into making blueprints and committing for materials and resources, and to actually go to tender, which we can't do yet because we don't have the money to put towards those steps. And we need to move on to the next stage, which is legalizing the agreement, formalizing it and becoming a legal document. And we're hoping that we will be able to get moving in that direction so we don't lose the money that is already available to us that's not yet able to be put into a bank account. With that in mind, we are enthusiastic about continuing this project. We know that it's the right thing for the school district and for this school and this community. And we look forward to speaking with you in June. As was stated earlier, we'll be sending an email address that you can send your questions to so that we can be prepared and have the right people in the room to answer your questions when we come to the ops meeting with any luck in June. And thank you for your time tonight. And we hope that we've been able to show you our efforts as we have worked under the support in principle. Thank you.
Thanks, Audrey. That was actually exactly 5 minutes. Very well done. and thanks to Ian and Bruce. I'm reflecting on this from December 2018 as one of the very first things that came to the new board that we voted on. So it's really encouraging to see how far this has come. So thank you for this report. I look forward to seeing what comes in June.
Chair?
Yes.
Before they leave, can you please ask them to send us those documents because we have not seen those before? All that information?
Yes, you can send them to trustees@sd61.bc.ca.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Elaine, for that. Okay, moving on to Karen Kwan, music programs in SD61. Karen, you know the drill. I don't need to tell you. Did you have a slide presentation or were you? No, okay.
No,
then
sorry,
you
have to listen to my voice.
There is nothing wrong with that at all. We will start when you start. I'll give you about a 30-second heads up when we're done, if that's okay with you, and then we'll wrap at that point. But over to you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Once again, thank you for allowing me to be part of your meeting and speak to you tonight. I'm coming to you with amazing news. Amos is proud to announce that in a few short weeks, we have raised the full amount of $208,000 and change, the cost to keep the elementary strings program for next school year. I know there are many parents and students watching tonight who will be extremely excited about this news. We believe the elementary strings program is a shining light in the Greater Victoria School District. Parents, students, and the community clearly believe that this is a program worth saving. This has very much been a community effort. Working with BC PAC, we have donations from 15 elementary PACs, middle school music PACs, and secondary music PACs. In addition, Tapestry Music and the Greater Victoria Youth Orchestra have made contributions. And we have over 370 individual donors who have contributed to our GoFundMe campaign. These community contributions supplement generous donations from both the Rifflandia Festival and the Patrick McNally Foundation. The Patrick McNally Foundation in particular is a repeat donor to the school district and has provided a letter of commitment that I will email to trustees. Many of our donors have requested that we share their comments with you. A document sharing donor input was emailed to all trustees earlier this afternoon. I would also like to inform trustees that we have the support of the GVTA to continue elementary strings with our fundraising efforts in order to fund staffing to run the program. This was communicated to district staff by Winona at the meeting between them and Amos on May 3rd. Private funds have been used by this district to fund programs and initiatives for years. In the superintendent's report, she has outlined some examples of how private funds have been used. Funds for building soccer turf fields at Oak Bay High and Vic High, and now of course Spectrum, to accepting fees for sports academies. I would also like to remind this board of other instances where private funds have been used to support staff FTEs. The district's ISP program is a large example of a non-public funds paying for teacher FTE. In the year 2000, this district also accepted a donation from artist Jimmy Wright to fund none other than the very program that we are currently trying to save, strings. Again, this donation was used specifically to fund teacher FTE for the strings program. So there are precedents for this. We believe that by funding this program for the upcoming school year, it will give the district the time needed to conduct a necessary program review, including relevant conversations with rights holders, stakeholders, teachers, principals, and parents. I'm very pleased to see in the superintendent's report to trustees that she is also recommending that a program review be conducted for this program. I have no doubt that together we can make this program viable, sustainable, cost-effective, and equitable. The superintendent's recommendation that the elementary strings program be offered to all elementary schools in Victoria, provided that each school's community wants this program, has Amos's full support. We see this as the first step to bring equity to the elementary strings program. I would like to remind trustees that should this funding be accepted, donors have asked for a guarantee that all funds will be used for the elementary strings program only. In fact, our donors have requested that before they release their funds to the district, they will require a written guarantee that their donations will only be used for elementary strings. While Amos supports any alternative music programs this district can offer at the elementary school level, our current fundraising efforts have been focused on the elementary strings program specifically. Any alternative music programs offered to elementary students next year will have to come from district funds directly. However, we have no doubt that this topic could be explored in a comprehensive program review. As parents, our hope for our children's education is that they will become critical, out-of-the-box thinkers, to become innovators, always looking for alternative solutions. It's easy for students to give up and walk away when a problem is too tough to solve. Trustees, by saying no to our fundraising efforts, you are telling our kids that creative solutions are not valued. That if you don't have the answer, it's okay to just put down your pencil, throw up your hands and say, I can't do it. As parents, we believe we've shown we can do it. On behalf of our vibrant community of students, families, educators, business owners, and arts lovers, it is our sincere hope that you will accept this donation to keep elementary strings running next year. And I am happy to answer any questions this board may have. Thank you.
Karen, also spot on 5 minutes. It's almost like you've done this before. Thank you for your presentation and what you have provided for the board this evening. We appreciate that. And please do send along that letter that you have ASAP as the board is deliberating on this evening. So it was important that we have that. Moving on to correspondence, we have April 29th, 2022, SD23. I actually don't need to really go through them. There's only two. Does anyone want to discuss either of those? Okay, we'll go to trustee reports. C1 Chair's report, annual work plan 2022. Any comments on the annual work plan? Seeing none, we'll go to trustee reports. Trustee Whitaker, your report, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, 1 second. Yeah, thank you for this. I attended an event today, that's my late report, and I just want to say how grateful and honored to update the board on the continuation and completion of the Rogers School Indigenous Community Education Series. It's been fantastic. Today was the final event and very special. I want to give a special thank you to John Harris, our District Elders and Indigenous Knowledge Facilitator, for preparing a very yummy salmon and oyster pit cook for us today, or a pit cook for us today. We were able to come together to nourish ourselves with gratitude for our learning and sharing, for our new relationships, and of course, the beautiful new drums and songs that we sang. The students were able to come by class to the pit fire where John shared his knowledge with them. And my heart was so filled to see how intent and content they were to be there, just sitting around the fire together, having little giggles and chats with each other, and just really enjoying themselves. I also want to thank Colette Cristante, who among, and I may have said that last name wrong, I apologize, who among many other tasks invited me into a drum circle today, where she and her students shared some of their favorite songs. I was so grateful for their strong voices and their steady beats. You know, to really describe how much joy the students have for drumming and singing, I couldn't do it, but it really can be best summed up by, I had the privilege of maybe eavesdropping and overhearing one of the students run up to his father after being in his drum circle and saying that, you know, in a very exaggerated voice, oh, my throat is so sore, I've lost my voice. And Dad asked why, and he said, because I was singing so loud and strong. He was so excited. I also want to thank the Rogers School Vice Principal Jen Farr once again, and Staff Sergeant Daryl Underwood and the Indigenous Education Department for bringing us together to do this work in a good way and being the conduit to build relationships, which will be the foundation of a strong community. It's just not possible for me to thank everyone and mention them who participated in today and throughout the events, but I really wish I could. I want to thank each and every one of you who has participated, sharing their time, their wisdom, and their good intentions with me. I left today feeling full in belly and with an overflowing heart. And I feel like I've made some new friends, and I'm truly, truly grateful for being included in this learning. So thank you very much. There are great things happening in our district.
Thank you for the report, Trustee Whitaker. Sounds like a powerful and delicious event. So thank you for that update. We'll go to board committee reports.
Can I just, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You slid over the chair's report, and I just wanted to follow up because
there is no chair's report, Trustee Whitaker. We're moving on to board committee reports.
Well, I just wanted to ask that you attended a meeting with Vista that you asked us all about to provide any input, and I just wondered if there was some follow-up from that meeting.
Oh, right. That hasn't happened yet. That is happening next week.
Okay, thank you.
That's the meeting with the new president in person. And then, as well as I let trustees know earlier today, there is a board chair's call on the 2nd. So trustees are free to pass on anything that they'd like me to bring to the new president and vice president of the BCSDA. So board committee reports. D1, Education Policy and Directions Committee. The draft minutes for May 2nd, 2022 are for information only. We have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District 61 approve revised policy 4304 bullying and harassment. Can I have a mover for the motion, please? Moved by Tom, seconded by Elaine. The motion is on the floor, trustees, for discussion. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we could go over, well, first of all, 3.3. My understanding was that this particular point would be removed because we don't actually have an approved policy as of yet. I wondered if other folks shared in that understanding.
Elaine?
That was not my understanding. In my notes, that was not one of the things I had written down. So what we have before us reflects what I had in my notes. Sorry.
So I guess then what I would say is that I would prefer to see us have that particular policy that's being referenced signed off, approved by the board before we reference it in a policy that will go live in effect once the board approves it. I don't think we should be referring to policies in a policy we're about to approve that don't actually exist. So maybe, Chair, I'll let you direct me in terms of how you'd like me to express my concerns. So there was 3.1, and then I have a couple of other items I want to.
Well, perhaps, Trustee Duncan, if I can,
yeah, please do.
Chase that interjection a bit. I don't know if staff can perhaps provide a bit of information on past practice around policy development and inclusion of policies by name that haven't been developed. I appreciate what Trustee Duncan is saying. Personally, I don't have a challenge with it because I appreciate that it is setting out a policy to be developed, but I'm curious what our past practice has been. If anyone can comment, and maybe that can't be answered here, but if it can, that would help me a little bit, and perhaps Trustee Duncan too, but that might also be assuming a bit. Secretary Treasurer Morris?
I don't know what the past practice has been. I do know that the board sometimes passes policies in draft for review in a year. That may be the case here.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Duncan, I'll let you do one more, and then I've got Trustee Whitaker with the hand up, and then Elaine. So Trustee Duncan, you can have one follow-up, and then we'll circle back around.
Sure. So just in following up, I guess about 3.3, respecting that you'll come back around so that I can raise the other concerns. In terms of 3.3, I don't think that, although I appreciate that the board can and should review new policies after they've been operationalized for a year. I don't think that that really addresses the concern here from my perspective. It's really not a matter of reviewing in a year. It's a matter of referencing and expecting folks to adhere to a policy that doesn't exist. I don't know how we would expect people to do that when it simply doesn't exist. So from a procedural fairness perspective, I think unless it's been approved and it actually exists and people can refer to it, then I don't, we can't expect them to adhere to something that literally doesn't exist. So, I can move an amendment after I hear the conversation and how it unfolds with my colleagues, but I would strongly suggest that we need to address that before considering passing this tonight.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Whitaker?
Okay, I got a few too. So, yeah, and
so sorry, I was muted. My apologies. We'll do a two, and then we'll go to Elaine and we'll go back around. I just want to make sure everyone has a fair shot here. Is that okay, Trustee Whitaker? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I understand that this has been on the agenda for a long time, but we really only just, we always ran out of time at every meeting and tabled it. So really, this is kind of like the second round here. So I just want to take a look. If you look at 2.4, is it 2.4? Hang on. Yeah, 2.4.3. This is, or I guess we need to start with, if you look at 1.1, it speaks in the rationale and it says the definition of bullying and harassment according to Worksafe BC's policy is as follows. And then all of 2.0 is about definitions. And then when we go down within those definitions to 2.4.3, it says an issue raised regarding the conduct of an employee or a trustee. I don't believe that that is what Worksafe says. I don't believe it points out and says specifically that this is a trustee. So I'm just concerned that we are quoting Worksafe BC and we're adding our own words in there. Because I don't think that's what Worksafe BC specifically says. I believe that's been inserted. So I have some concerns with how to deal with that. And further on that, if Worksafe BC does apply to trustees, I would seek some further clarification. I know it's come up before, and if trustees have an issue with feeling bullied and harassed, Worksafe does not apply, was what I've been told by legal counsel. So I'd just like to have some clarification around that. And then my next one, again, I have 3.1 on my notes, which trustee Duncan may have brought up. Okay, no, I don't know what my issue was there. I guess really what my issue was on that is where I agree with that 3.1, that we won't tolerate any instance of bullying or harassment in the workplace. To date, there is nowhere for a trustee to make a complaint about bullying and harassment about another trustee. So I'm just seeking, there needs to be something else within this, that if we're going to make this about trustees and employees, because I believe this is about employees, but we seem to be trying to pepper it with trustees, then that piece needs to be addressed in some way. If a trustee wants to make a complaint against another trustee, what is the process? How does that happen? What's the outline on that? That's my two. Do you want me to keep going and then go back to Nicole?
Could we pause and maybe allow staff an opportunity to respond?
Sure.
and then we'll cycle back around, if that's okay, Trustee Whitaker? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. Staff, you've got a couple questions there from Trustee Whitaker, if you'd like to respond. Oh, Kim, I think you're on mute. Put a
I can
dollar in the jar.
respond unless the chair or the superintendent would like to. Okay, so 2.4.3. So as we can recall, during one of the committee meetings where whistleblower came before, I think, Operations Committee, there was a request to put in a definition of complaint. And so this is the definition that was inserted and came
I'm
from-
sorry, am we doing whistleblower or are we doing bullying and harassment?
Oh, sorry.
It's whistleblower.
Okay, then I'm the one
No,
that's
I'm
wrong.
sorry. My
Just-
apologies. My apologies. It's bullying and harassment. My apologies.
Okay,
We're
then
on,
never
we're
mind.
on D1B.
Okay, sorry.
No, go ahead, Kim.
So I believe these good faith and complaint were requested to have definitions per committee. And so I think 2.4.3 differs from 2.1 because 2.1 describes the person being intimidated, and the 2.4.3 speaks to the conduct of an employee or a trustee in how the employee is being treated or feels they're being treated.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to
And then,
Elaine.
sorry.
Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
but do you want me to go on to the other one?
Yeah, my apologies. I'm rushing ahead.
I believe the way for a trustee to make a complaint about another trustee would be the trustee code of conduct. And perhaps that could be referenced here if we wanted it to be, but I would think that's the place where trustee conduct would be addressed.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Elaine, we'll go to you, and then we'll cycle to any other trustees who have an additional question. And if not, we'll go back to Trustee Duncan and Trustee Whitaker again.
I was thinking that if Trustee Duncan, if her only issue with 3.3 is that the policy for social media has not been approved yet, it is up for consultation. If this is approved as it is, with just the policy number not highlighted yet because we don't have the policy approved, I believe that this one could probably be held until the other policy is approved, because it's out for consultation right now. We could bring it back and then release them both at the same time once the board has approved and gone through and made its revisions on the social media policy. That would be my suggestion, that this can still move forward to the next step and then come forward with the social media policy at the same time to the public.
Okay, thank you for that. Elaine, are there any questions from trustees before I go back to Trustees Duncan and Whitaker? Seeing none, Trustee Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's I think a quick one, which I'll start with under references. I think we should include the School Act, and hopefully that'll just be a quick amendment and friendly amendment, but I put that one out there. So to add the School Act under references. And then at 4.1, it reads, the Board of Education is responsible to ensure compliance with the School Act and Worksafe legislation through the superintendent. So I would suggest, I certainly find that a little bit unclear. I would suggest that we amend that wording to read, the Board of Education delegates responsibility for the day-to-day compliance with the School Act and Worksafe legislation to the superintendent. I think that is just, in my view, more clear about what the situation is. And so I don't know if you want me to make a formal amendment to suggest that, or if we can hear from other colleagues what they think.
Yeah, I think perhaps an amendment, because that does, I mean, it's maybe debatable whether or not it's a significant change, but I think let's just make it tidy and just go for an amendment formally, and then we can move in that direction.
Sounds good. So I'm looking to move an amendment at 4.1. Then so that sentence would read instead, the Board of Education delegates responsibility for the day-to-day compliance with the School Act and Worksafe legislation to the superintendent.
Okay, and do we have a seconder for that? Trustee Whitaker seconded. Okay. So Nicole, sorry, Trustee Duncan, you can continue to motivate if you'd like, or we can go to Trustee Whitaker, or we can
No, I
go to
think
other trustees, or just go to a vote. Okay, Trustee Whitaker.
No, I think the wording's more clear. I can compromise.
Okay, any other trustees with comments, questions, thoughts, or concerns on the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call a question on the amendment. All those in favor of amending as proposed by Trustee Duncan? All those opposed? And that is, I'm opposed as well. That is defeated. Trustee Duncan, back to you.
No, that was it.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Trustee Whitaker.
Okay, and sorry, I think Trustee Duncan's faster than I am, so I want to back up to 3.3 was also a concern of mine. And I guess really this is whether or not we legally or morally are able to say such a thing. I'm concerned that we're kind of encroaching a little bit, and I would use Barry Neufeld as, you know, maybe an example. I'm not really sure that we are in a position to be telling people what they are posting or doing on their own personal accounts. Yes, they should be kind and nice and all those other things, but if they want to have a very erratic, different opinion on something, they're allowed to do that. I don't think legally, I mean, this is my concern here. I'm not saying that we shouldn't all have good guidelines of what is good social media, but I am concerned where we say that they're responsible to ensure their consistent with the policy, which I'm not even sure what that policy says. And is that policy going to go so far that I would truly object to that? I believe that people get to post and say the things that they want to say, and they get to also be responsible and accountable to that. It is our job as educators and within the education system to teach our students what is appropriate and acceptable. And as adults, we need to remind each other, but I don't know that we are the appropriate people to be policing that. I certainly don't want staff spending their time following and doing whatever it is, spying on social media. I want them working with kids. So I continue to struggle with 3.3, and I would like, you know, at this time, until something more comes forward on that, I would feel more, I'm inclined to strike it. There's just, it seems, unless as well, you know, does somebody have a legal opinion on what we can do and cannot tell people to do and not do on social media? Is there anything there that would dissuade me to think that, or are we just making assumptions?
I don't know if the policy committee or staff have any comments on that. I'm not hearing any. Was there a motion then Trustee Whitaker?
I would like to strike it until such time as we either have a legal opinion that provides more clarity on what it is that we can and cannot expect legally enforceably put into a policy. I don't think putting something into a policy that you cannot enforce is reasonable. And at this point in time, I don't think that we're there. I think this is a moral statement. I don't think it's a legally binding statement. I don't think we're allowed.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a seconder? Second, Trustee Duncan. Any further discussion on this? I will put myself on the list. So Trustee Duncan, then Trustee Ferris, then I'll go myself. So Trustee Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, just a seconder. I just wanted to add that, I share Trustee Whitaker's concerns. I think it's difficult for us to get into a meaningful discussion about the extent to which what is intended here will overstep or put our staff in a situation of becoming the moral or ethical police, and enter into making assessments which really just is beyond the scope of both their work and the work of this board. And so it goes back to, I guess, my point at the beginning of our discussion on this item. Without an approved policy, I just don't think not only is it not good practice, but I think that it really is not procedurally fair to have an item here listed. I mean, I don't even know how we can have a meaningful discussion tonight about the concerns because we haven't seen it. We don't know what's there. We don't yet. So I hope that just from a common sense perspective, we can strike it until we have something before us that we can debate and decide on as a board. And then at that point, if the board decides it's prudent, amend this policy to add it back in if that's the will of the board.
Okay. Trustee Ferris.
Thank you. I think it's in a way unfortunate that this has to be in here, but I think it does have to be in here, given what we've seen over the last 4 years. I think that basically it comes down to, as trustees, we have one spokesman for the board, and that spokesman is the chair. People will come to us and express their concerns, and I think it's very important that we listen to them. But I think it's also very important that we don't take sides on their issue when the board hasn't discussed it or come to a conclusion about it. I think that's pretty basic, and it's something that I think we all understand. So I think it's pretty important that he be here at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Trustee Ferris. You have certainly highlighted my own feelings. I've said this before with regards to this piece. It is not in its totality markedly different from what you'll find from government social media use guidelines for government and public employees. In fact, if you do a Google search for the government employee social media guidelines, you'll find a multi-page document outlining exactly what employees should and should not use social media for. And I think it is incumbent upon us to have a policy on the books, because not having a policy means we're not addressing the issue. So I think as an employer, I think it is incumbent upon us to have this in place. So I certainly will not be supporting the amendment. Any other discussion?
Kind of clarification.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to clarify that the issue here that we're discussing is not whether the board should adopt a social media use policy, but rather whether a social media use policy that doesn't currently exist should be referenced in a policy to do with bullying and harassment that we're proposing to pass tonight. I just want us to be clear on what it is that we're debating.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to make sure we're not re-entering into debate. Any further discussion on this motion? Trustee Whitaker can close if she would like. Yep, Trustee Whitaker.
And I would say, I agree with Tom that we shouldn't be picking sides, and we shouldn't be do we, we need to be kind, and we do know what to do with social media, but really, you commented that a couple of things, that there's these guidelines and that, within the government or whatnot, but none of that is being presented to us. I am not opposed to there being a policy. I'm opposed with being asked to approve something without seeing it. And at the moment, there is no policy, there's no direction. Why would I pass something that I haven't seen? I don't sign contracts without reading them either. So I guess that's really the piece here for me. Until we've got that, that information that tells us what that is, I think we should take it out with a commitment to, as we move forward and that policy is there. When I listen to both Tom and Ryan, to me, it feels like you've read that policy, but I haven't. I have no clue what you're asking me to approve in there. And for, as a trustee, I find that uncomfortable.
So just making a point, it seems like an insinuation was made that a policy exists that Tom and I have read. We have not. So just want to put that on the floor.
The point of clarification was you're able to speak calm and clear and confident to something because you have some idea in your mind what that policy looks like.
Okay,
I don't have that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Debate is closed. We will call the question. All those in favor of the amendment to strike 3.3? Those opposed? And the motion fails. Trustee Whitaker, was there another piece you wanted to bring to the floor for discussion?
I guess not necessarily for discussion, and maybe it's just a question, but I do note 5.3 that was struck, which was the trustee sanctions policy. And last we left, I believe that I had requested that the motion to create such a policy was presented, and I would just note that that hasn't happened. And if there was a follow-up to show that we were actually, the board had instructed the policy committee to create such a policy.
Sure, we can take that under advisement. I don't know if staff have any follow-up to that, but I know they're here and listening. Any further comments or questions from trustees on this policy in front of us? Elaine?
If I'm not mistaken, trustees did see the social media policy for the first time on the April agenda. So it's not been,
yes,
it's not been that we haven't seen it. It's not been, but there's been not time to put it on any other agenda since then. So but it has been circulated for everybody's view in April.
Yes, that's correct. And I misspoke when I think I said we haven't seen it. I think we haven't. It hasn't come forward since April for us to dig into it. In any event, that is the case as it stands today. Any further discussion on the bullying and harassment policy in front of us? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question then that the Board of Education of School District 61 approve revised policy 4304 bullying and harassment. All those in favor of adopting the policy? Those opposed? And the motion carries with trustees Duncan and Whitaker opposed and the balance in favor. We'll go to D2, operations and operations policy and planning committee draft minutes are there for information. We have 3 recommended motions. We'll start with recommended motion BI, new policy whistleblower. And the recommended motion is that the Board of Education of School District 61, Greater Victoria, approve the new policy whistleblower. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Moved by Elaine. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Tom. Open for discussion and or debate. Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question on the policy. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you, everybody. We'll go to B2 or BII, revised policy 8251, trustee code of conduct. Recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District 61, Greater Victoria approve revised policy 8252, trustees code of conduct. Can I have a motion to approve? Moved by Elaine. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Tom. Discussion or debate? Trustee Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to just clarify around some of the pecuniary and conflict of interest definitions. I know that we included under definitions at 2.1 a conflict of interest definition. I'm wondering whether there's merit in defining some other terms such as pecuniary interest. And I wondered if, through the chair to staff, if there's been any discussion of including a definition on that.
Over to staff.
It's not been discussed and not been requested to date.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion on the floor? Trustee Whitaker.
Okay, so 3.4, I don't disagree with the statement, but I think there should be some sort of action in there. So something in the wording, it's, trustees will create an understanding or something. Anyway, you can look at that one a bit more. It just says create an understanding and building respectful relationships is a healthy thing. Right? Yes, we agree with that, but it doesn't say that we'll do that. So just a little flaw there. And then to go to 3.6, I think is going to be the same conversation we've just had. To say that trustees are individually responsible for their posts and likes, are consistent with the code of conduct. Again, I asked the question, what are we legally and what morally are we able to do? I struggle when we write things that we can't enforce. So yeah, I'm concerned about that. We're writing in things that are not enforceable. There's nothing we can do about it. We don't have a legal opinion. I realize that folks are in a position where they feel that social media has been very damaging over the last bit. And I don't necessarily disagree, but I do know that we don't have a decision yet. And thus I get concerned when we start writing things in, when we don't have all of the details and the facts, and that it's not something we can enforce. I think there's got to be a better way to write this in here where it doesn't put the onus on district staff to enforce this or trustees. I don't want it to be something where people are spending their time going, well, I didn't like your post, so I'm going to do this. And I didn't like what you said. There's got to be a better way for people to work together and to express what they don't like, right? I mean, how do you ensure that your posts aren't offensive to people, right? We all know we've all posted something where we clearly did not intend any offense and it was taken wrong. My father in the early days when he could still work the computer, well, that caps lock was a big thing. So I'm just concerned that we are setting ourselves up to be a far more punitive and disciplinary board rather than a board that works together and works to resolve problems in a positive way. So just concerned.
Thank you. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just wondered if we could consider what I hope would be maybe a friendly amendment. At 3.20, I believe it's the second or third sentence. So the sentence which starts with, when a trustee becomes aware that they are in a position that creates a conflict of interest, whether real or perceived, they must declare the nature and extent of the conflict at a public board meeting and abstain from deliberating or voting on the issue giving rise to the conflict. I just wanted to point out that trustees, regardless of whether it's a public board meeting where the potential conflict of interest arises, or in fact an in-camera board meeting, would need to do the same thing, and that's recuse themselves. So I'm wondering if we can just say at a board meeting, rather, because we need to account for both a public and in-camera board meeting, that issue might arise, and in both instances, trustees should recuse themselves.
So just so I understand, Trustee Duncan, you're suggesting striking the word public before board meeting in
Correct.
That second to last sentence on the top of page 47.
Correct. Yeah. So we'll just read at a
Okay.
board meeting.
Does do any trustees have a concern with that? I don't necessarily. So, okay, that's consent. So done.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Trustee Duncan. I think that was a good, reasonable. Trustee Whitaker, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just keep going here. So I just want to, I guess, okay, so I would like to, if we were to look at, hang on. I just see some inconsistencies when we look at this, what is it? Sorry, I think it's the very last line anyway, that says,
Of which one? Sorry, Trustee Whitaker.
sorry,
I wanna-
just give me 2 seconds
oh,
here.
sorry.
Was it 3.26? Anyway, there is a line in here that clearly states that the trustees recognize, or, you know, that the superintendent in charge. Oh, here, the individual trustees shall not provide direction to staff members. It's 3.26. Trustees work with the chair of the board and the superintendent. The superintendent is responsible for communication, directions, and associated expectations to staff on behalf of the Board of Education. And I totally agree with that, and I think we all do. But then when I go through this document and I look at 3.7, that's why I was sorry, all the scrolling. I look at 3.7, and now trustees will respect the authority vested in the role of superintendent schools, blah, blah, blah. Offers directions of the superintendent schools and their leadership team, right? So now it's not just the superintendent, it's the superintendent and the leadership team. And then when I look down to 3.9, a trustee may, so now we've inserted the secretary treasurer. If there's uncertainty, we go to all these other people. A trustee may request guidance from their trustee, superintendent, and the secretary treasurer. And then we continue down, we're at 3.9, and then we do this again at 3.15. We look at 3.15, and now once again, if there's uncertainty, we go to the board chair, the superintendent, or the secretary treasurer, or ask the board for clarification. So I'm just concerned with the inconsistency there. I think it's really important that the trustees do continue to go to the superintendent. Anything that's going on, the superintendent should be informed. It's fine if you want to ask the secretary treasurer one of these questions, but I do believe that that should not go around the superintendent, which I'm concerned with the way those are written. It should always be the superintendent. It's the superintendent's responsibility to be the conduit between the board and staff. And I'm concerned with how suddenly it just looks like the scope of the secretary treasurer and the leadership team is being expanded beyond their role, and it's diminishing the superintendent's role. So I just think that for me, I would like to strike from 3.7, the leadership team, from 3.9, strike the secretary treasurer, and from 3.15, again, strike the secretary treasurer, just so it's consistent with 3.26. And it's not going to offer confusion in the future as people read this. I don't want to see new trustees going to the secretary treasurer and not the superintendent. And that's what they are able to do with the way it was written before. I know it's not meant to be, you know, confusing that or anybody's doing anything wrong. I just really think, based on some of the concerns that have been presented over the last while of who you talk to, you know, you have to follow the proper processes, that they need to be written in there. I can see new trustees getting in trouble for not going to the right person if they just go to the secretary treasurer or somebody else on the leadership team.
So is that, sorry, I'm just confirming that that was a,
yeah,
an
I want to
amendment?
strike those
Okay.
things. It's
So we have-
all
so
the
we have-
same idea, right?
yeah. So we have an amendment. Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Trustee Duncan seconded. Okay, Trustee Whitaker, as the mover, did you want to lay out any more of your discussion debate?
I really think it's important that we are consistent in our messaging, and really I think 3.26 is the most important message. I also think it's important that we put the responsibility with the superintendent, and that we ensure that we're honoring her role, and that, you know, she's not going to miss out on information in the future.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker. Trustee Duncan?
No, I think Trustee Whitaker nicely summarized why it's important. We do want to be consistent, and given that the superintendent is the board, the employee of the board, that the board manages directly and is responsible, the board delegates authority to operationalize its will, so to speak. I don't think it's a good idea to in any way suggest that the superintendent shouldn't be the conduit for communicating.
So I'm going to put myself on the list. I really appreciate the piece around consistency. From my perspective, I do see this as being consistent because I see each of these clauses addressing a specific piece. I see 3.7, trustees will respect the authority vested in the role of the superintendent of schools by definition of the School Act. And when it talks about the leadership team, to me, it's talking about the flow of authority. Authority flows from the superintendent down through the rest of the leadership team and further down in a flow of authority through the system. That's naturally how this works. When I look at 3.9 around the uncertainty of the scope of clauses contained within the code, trustees may consult with the chair, superintendent, or secretary treasurer. Again, to me, I read this as specifically with regards to the scope of clauses contained within the trustee code of conduct, looking where authority flows. So trustees consult with the chair or superintendent, and then if need be or directed to the secretary treasurer, this provides that authority. That is where the authority flows. If we go down to 3.15, I believe, which was the next one that was discussed, again, around confidentiality, this is where authority flows, and it is very specifically laid out in each of these clauses. First the chair, then the superintendent, then the secretary treasurer, or ask the board for clarification. So for me, each of these is addressing a very specific piece of information, and it is placing in the code the flow of authority. So for me, it's quite clear. I don't know if other trustees have a similar view. I know Trustee Duncan and Trustee Whitaker don't, and that's absolutely fine. For me, this is just how I'm reading this. Any trustees have any further comments? I'll go back to Trustee Whitaker to close then.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll just reiterate, I think it's really important that we keep those roles intact and that we don't see some roles be expanded and others diminished. And I think that the secretary treasurer and the leadership team should be not included in the areas where it is the superintendent's responsibility.
Okay, we will call the question on this amendment. All those in favor of striking the recommended pieces in 3.7, 3.9, and 3.15? And those opposed? And the motion is defeated. Any other amendments? Trustee Whitaker, go ahead.
Just hang on, I gotta scroll here again.
Before I go, Trustee Whitaker, I just want to check and see if any other trustees have pieces they want to bring up for discussion before I go back to Trustee Whitaker for another round. I see none, so Trustee Whitaker, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And so 3.10, I think, addresses or acknowledges my previous concern where trustees shall ensure their comments are issue-based, not demeaning or disparaging, so generally not bullying, harassing each other. But nowhere is there a process or some sort of way to deal with this. So it's all fine, you write it in there, but there is no police on that. So I just want to express that I think that that should have something behind it, but it doesn't. I also wanted to point out 3.17 I actually had a question on 3.13. What is the purpose of that clause?
So before we jump to 3.13, just on 3.10,
Yeah.
staff, is there a, I'm making a rather large assumption that because this is a policy, not an enabling regulation or other step-by-step regulation, that's why this is here in this form. But please correct me if I'm wrong. Either to Deb or to Jim.
The code, sorry. Deb, did you want to go? No. So I think this is a code of conduct. This is the behavior of the trustees and how the board will, each individual trustee will conduct itself on the board. In terms of 3.10 or any other clause, if a code of conduct is not adhered to, then sanctions would come into play, and that is something that should accompany eventually this policy. After the code of conduct is approved, then the sanctions should be developed.
Well, to be clear, I don't think they should be sanctions. I think we need to have a process that allows for us to have a positive resolution.
Right, I think
but-
you used a different word last time. Sorry about that.
And then I think there was a second question from Trustee Whitaker, which was
Yeah, it
the
was-
rationale for 3.13.
I'm just baffled how it got there. Like, under what situation would that ever happen?
So either Deb or Kim can let us know.
I think it's just a reiteration that you wouldn't use confidential information for personal gain, as the last sentence says. Sums it up.
I see Jordan has her hand up. Jordan, go ahead.
It's a line that was in our previous code of conduct or our current one, and it's something that you see in the codes of conduct across the province. So obviously we hope that that would not be a thing that would ever happen. But it probably has, and that's why it lives there in codes of conduct. An example I could see would be if I tried to get information about one of my children's teachers or something like that and used it some kind of a way to use that. I mean, I'm just making it up, but
No,
certainly
good
it's
call.
a very, I'm sorry, I'm speaking. It's a common inclusion in codes of conduct. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. That's good to just help put the context for me.
Okay. Any further discussion on this policy?
Yeah.
Okay, I see Trustee Duncan has her hand up, so we'll go to her and then I'll go back to Trustee Whitaker.
Yeah, I just had a question around 3.9. So it says, if there is uncertainty about the scope of any of the clauses contained in the code, trustees may consult with the chair, superintendent, or secretary treasurer, or ask of the board for clarification. A trustee may request guidance from other trustees, the superintendent, the secretary treasurer in regards to conflict of interest matters. I'm just wondering, I would certainly like to see some other supports in place for trustees where they do have questions or where there are concerns about a trustee's adherence to the code. So for instance, in matters where a conflict arises, for instance, between a trustee and a chair, I think it would be better to have a more independent avenue for trustees to seek some support about interpreting the code and interpreting their conduct in relation to it. I don't know whether that is the BCSTA, whether that is a third party, whether it's legal counsel or what that is, but I foresee potential issues with this if the only avenue for a trustee where there's a disagreement and really it's down to judgment, only being able to turn to the chair or to staff. I would like to see a trustee have some external support in place and actually set that out in the code. It's something that I've struggled with as we've talked about these various drafts over the last few months. And I think I just foresee that there is a risk that this board will end up in endless debates about whether the code's being adhered to. And I think it would be better for us to have some external advice and assistance rather than relying on the internal channels that are being suggested in the draft so far.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Duncan. Trustee Whitaker, over to you for next review.
Thank you. And I think we discussed this before, but I'm wondering that 3.17 and 3.18 should just be merged. They're the same thing. No, like just merge those two?
They are on page 51.
They're merged on page 51?
Mhm.
What am I looking at? On page 46?
The
Not sure which draft that was, but the
page 51 is the new draft with the strikeouts and the red.
Okay, hang on, let me scroll down even more. So if that's the case, never mind that one. And then my other one was, oh, and 3.28 has been struck now. Thank you. So no, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Never mind.
Any further comments or discussions on the, excuse me, on the trustee code of conduct policy? Seeing and hearing none. Good discussion, trustees. All those in favor of approving revised policy 8252 trustee code of conduct, please signify. All those in favor? Those opposed? Trustee Duncan and Whitaker opposed, the balance in favor, and the motion passes. Carbon Neutral Action Plan report. That the Board of Education of School District 61 accept the Carbon Neutral Action report as presented. I believe this is this Mr. Leslie who is reporting now? Sorry, I think maybe I've lost something here. Or is this?
we weren't intending to report again. This is a recommendation from Ops where it was
Oh,
presented.
that's right. Thank you. Thank you. Can I have a motion to accept the report, please? Moved by Angie and seconded by Elaine. Discussion. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to discuss how we plan to meet the 50% reduction target by 2030 in relation to buildings. You know, in our plan, we're acknowledging that buildings are the single largest source of GHG emissions for our school district. We're also acknowledging that really in order to address that, we need to address heating systems in particular, where a lot of the emissions are coming from. And that will require electrification, which is, you know, costly, and it does touch on some of the associated costs with electrification. But at the moment, we're not going into a great deal of depth about how it is that we are going to address the need to electrify, and especially given the current climate, which appears, you know, provincially to support the use of gas-fired boilers rather than, you know, renewables like electricity or geothermal. So I wonder if we could, through you to staff, really speak to how we're going to address that outside of this plan, because I know that this plan at the moment anyways doesn't go into a great deal of detail about that. And then my second point that I wanted to raise tonight relates to page 64 of the report, and it's the reference to renewable natural gas. I would really, you know, like us to not use the word renewable when we're talking about natural gas. I would prefer that we simply, you know, call it natural gas, and acknowledge that it's not renewable. But, you know, I understand that we might want to acknowledge that there are carbon capture technologies that are aimed at capturing and reusing, you know, gas. And although those are very much in their infancy and they're new and largely untested, that, you know, at this point, the plan seems to suggest that this is, you know, one of the greatest potential contributors in the future for decreasing net emissions through the purchase of so-called renewable natural gas. So I'm wondering if through the chair to the appropriate staff member, if we can have some discussion about those 2 points.
Over to staff or whoever wants to field those questions.
I think that unless Marnie Vistisen is still here and would like to speak to them, I think there's a couple of things that I would say, and I'm sure Deb has some things to add, but for me personally, in terms of acknowledging our buildings, our biggest emitter, I think we need to attend to that through our capital plan, and our long range facilities plan will speak to that as well, which also needs renewing. And in terms of renewable natural gas, I really don't have a comment on that. I think we would probably need Brian to speak to that a little bit more. And that's how I would answer that. I don't think that we can roll out a plan tonight. I think that's part of the Climate Action Committee's work and part of our long range facilities planning through our capital planning and funding that we attend to our buildings, which are our biggest emitters.
Any other comments? I know, I think Marnie Vistisen Harwood is here. So Marnie, if you'd like to follow up, please feel free.
No, sorry, I'm still here. Yes. Thank you. I agree completely with what Kim said. I think bringing Brian back, I know he has a plan, and I think a lot of it resides around funding. So I think Kim is bang on.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Duncan, I'll go one more to you, and then I've got Elaine and then Trustee Whitaker.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up if I may, Chair. So I'm glad to hear that the capital plan will be a focus in terms of us putting forward requests to the ministry for funding to allow us to meet our targets. I guess my concern is that from what I understand, we're very much focused on gas-fired boilers. And whenever we do have an opportunity to, or largely speaking, when we do have an opportunity to replace aging infrastructure related to heating in our buildings, we tend to replace it with gas fired boilers, or condensing boilers. So I guess really I just want to put a placeholder so that when we come back and we're going to be talking about the capital plan next month, and when we do, I hope that what we see is a move to requesting from the ministry funding to help us move away from gas and towards other options that will actually help us to get to our goal, both in 2030 and 2050. And then the only other thing I would say is, I don't know what my colleagues think, but the issue of renewable natural gas and whether in fact gas can be called renewable, I appreciate that tonight we may not be able to remove that, but I think we should spend some time discussing it, because it is, in my view, very problematic. And I think if we're going to put in a report that that renewable natural gas is, I think we call it one of the greatest potential contributors to decreasing net emissions, then I think we need to understand the technologies out there and the extent to which they are, in fact, a realistic source for us to be investing in. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time.
I'm going to put myself on the list at the end because I have a few comments, but I'm going to go to Elaine and then Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. So at the May Ops, this is still May, at the May Ops meeting, we had a preview of the 5-year capital plan, and we had this submission come before us. And then after that, we had an announcement from the government about the Royal BC Museum. I am so incredibly, I'm mad. I've been on the board for a long time, and we have been nickel and diming and looking for money for seismic projects and our aging infrastructure. And now we're in a climate emergency, and yet the government can spend $1 billion on a museum. So I'm hoping that, I don't know if it's too late, but I'm hoping next month that we can have a fulsome discussion about that when we do get the 5-year capital plan, because it shows that we've got $65 million worth of seismic mitigation that we're submitting to the government, we're now nickel and diming to try and to come up with some kind of an action plan for climate where dollars could we might not be here to have our aging infrastructure if we don't do something about the climate. And we have asbestos in our walls. And so this was really, really annoying to me that we've been nickel and diming. His $1 billion could probably fix most of the problems in all the school districts in the province. So I'm hoping that next month we can have a fulsome discussion about this, because I've been really angry for a couple of weeks now over this. So ever since Friday the 13th, when this came out, and it's just been gnawing at me. So I've said my piece tonight, but I think that we should have a fulsome discussion about sending some message to the government and to BCSCA to say enough is enough. We need the dollars to help our aging infrastructure now. And with the climate emergency, it's even more dire right now.
Thank you, Elaine. Trustee Whitaker?
Thank you, and thank you, Trustee Leonard, because I am going to be echoing with you on that one. For me, I just wanted some clarification, not so much on this report, but along with climate, that we'll receive a report from the Climate Action Committee. Specifically, of course, I'm looking to see what's happening with the waste policy non-committee. So I'm just seeking clarification that there will be a report in June because it's the end of the year. So I'm seeing nods. Thank you for that.
Okay, there's a lot. I have a comment and I have a question. So because there's been so much talk about RNG, I did a little bit of research myself. Don't worry, it wasn't Fortis research, because I don't think that can necessarily be trusted as unbiased. But in researching the RNG energy development process, you learn that RNG is developed from mitigation of waste, that about 5 to 6% of global emissions comes from landfills and wastewater treatment, which most RNG comes from. And I'm not going to get into a long, protracted debate about RNG, whether it's good, whether it's bad. CO2 is bad, but the fact is some organic matter will have to be drawn down from the atmosphere in order for the same amount of CO2 that was created when this original organic material grew. So drawdown and release is essentially equal. The idea and my hope is that you can develop an RNG stream and distribution system that is carbon neutral. Does that exist right now? No, but you need to get there at some point. So you have to keep a keen eye on carbon accounting and the supplier side of RNG. My challenge is what I've heard from a lot of RNG anti people out there is they have not offered any evidence that there's creative accounting going on when it comes to RNG development. So I know that there's a big lobby out there against RNG, but I'm not hearing a lot of accounting for what I'm hearing. So that's just what I want to put on the record. Drawing down emissions that would be in the biosphere from landfills and wastewater treatment while displacing emissions from burning fossil fuels is a good thing. So anyways, that's just what I wanted to say on that point. My second point was more around and kind of in relation to Trustee Duncan's first piece regarding boiler replacement. And it's clear to me that we can't keep, the idea is to transition and to electrify. That needs to be our focus, fully electrify, industrial, home heating, and transportation. I mean, those are the big three. In order to do that, we need to move progressively away from fossil fuels, which does include gas, which does include RNG. So my question is to staff. To me, this means we have to be moving progressively more away from natural gas, RNG, frack gas, and more towards heat pump systems and systems that are capable and have a capacity to provide the same kind of energy delivery that a boiler does. To my mind, that means putting in place a policy that says any of our future boiler upgrades should not be replaced with gas, but should be replaced with heat pumps. And if it can't be done, we need to wait until a time and period that it can be done. So my question to staff is, would such a policy in that vein be unnecessarily and potentially punitive is the wrong word, but restrictive to the point of creating a danger zone for our school development, because I want to get us to a point where we can start shifting away from gas boilers and more towards electrification. But we can't do it if we don't have the funding. And if we don't have the funding, we have to maintain on course, which is, it always comes down to money. So just my question to staff, would it be unnecessarily or prolongedly challenging to bring in a policy around only replacing gas boilers and gas heat with equitably energy generating heat pumps?
I'll kick it off, and then I'm sure Marnie or Deb might have some comments, but my concern would be with a policy that was restrictive. I think there is some room to make some statements about what we hope for. My concern is, and I'm no expert, but would be that, let's say we're applying for a boiler upgrade at Spectrum or Reynolds or Mackenzie or wherever we're applying for, but that we don't want a gas-fired boiler, that we want a heat pump. Does the design of the building render it such that the board's good intentions around heat pumps and such are making the project that might be a CNCP project, minor capital project of $500,000, now a $2.5 million project due to the design? And in the meantime, as we save for a $2.5 million project or hope it gets approved, meanwhile, our regular inefficient boiler is barreling away for the next 5 years until we get that project saved for or approved. In the meantime, if we had a project to upgrade a gas boiler for $500,000, would we have been more carbon neutral in that 5-year period? So it's really about understanding. I don't think we have enough information to understand the implications of a policy like that, but that pops off the top of my head. And I don't know, Marnie, if you have anything to add.
No, nothing to add really, except for a lot of our boiler upgrades right now, we're working with the mechanical engineers and actually looking for putting in infrastructure like that we can put in the future. So it is at the front of our mind to look at moving towards electrification.
I really appreciate the idea of future-proofing our energy generation and distribution systems. Thanks, both of you. I appreciate that feedback. It's just very much top of mind. And I understand cost is a lot, but the cost of not doing it now is also significant. Mm-hmm. So I think we're all very aware. I will relinquish my time. Does anyone else have any further comments on the carbon neutral action report? Trustee Duncan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. I wonder if that we have any information on the future costs of purchasing offsets that the staff could share with the board.
Kim getting a no.
I don't have anything at this time.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'm going to call the question on the motion to accept the carbon neutral action report as presented. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thanks, everybody. We'll go to the audit committee. Oh,
can I just interrupt? I just want to apologize to everybody, but I have hurt my neck and my back, so I have reached the point in the meeting where you might see me just need to stand a bit. I've been sitting a lot today, so my apologies.
That's okay. Thank you. I hope that it doesn't hurt too badly. I'm sorry, Trustee Whitaker. I have back issues myself, so I feel you. Okay, so we'll go to the Audit Committee Report, 2021-2022 Audit Planning Report. We have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District 61 approve the 2021-2022 Audit Planning Report as presented. Can I have a mover? Moved by Tom. Can I have a seconder? Seconded by Elaine. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Audit Committee Report from May 9th. Oh, Jordan, yes?
Just going to suggest that we take a quick 2-minute bio break at some point here.
Yeah, could we, I don't, is anyone going to want to comment on D3B? Because if we not, we can move through that one. That's the Audit Committee Report from May 9th. No? Okay. So let's go through this and then we can take a 5-minute break. So B, Audit Committee Report, May 9th, that the Board of Education of School District 61 accept the March 2022 Quarterly Financial Report as presented. Can I have a mover? Moved by Tom, seconded by Elaine. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Can I have a motion for a 5-minute break? Moved by Trustee Whitaker, seconded by Trustee Duncan. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thanks, everyone. 5-minute break. Okay, we'll do a 1 minute warning for folks. All right, we can all come on back now. Turn on those cameras. We've all had a quick stretch, some tea. And there's Trustee Duncan. Just looking for Trustee Whitaker and Elaine, and then I think we're ready. There's Trustee Whitaker. And we'll just wait for Elaine, and we have Elaine. Look at that. All righty. So now we'll go to the district team leadership reports. First up is the interim superintendent's report. Interim Superintendent Whitten, over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair Painter. You will see on page 95 of the pack-up my superintendent's report, interim superintendent's report. A couple of things that I would like to highlight. We had on May 2nd the student representative dinner. That included the reps that we've had this year, as well as some of the reps that we'll have next year. So good conversation there, and many thanks to the student representatives who came throughout the year to different meetings. Also, music program meeting. I had Assistant or Associate Superintendent Caldwell and I met with the Reynolds music students and had a good conversation with them, and also with the Advocacy for Music in Schools group on May 3rd. And then lastly, with the gratitude, I would like to thank Dr. Nimi and the Indigenous Education Department, as well as the district team, for planning, preparing, and hosting the first district's Indigenous Film Festival on the Professional Development Day of May 20th. We had over 1,200 staff attend. The films were located in 7 different areas of the city. We had elders, moderators, facilitators, and witnesses participate. 10 films were shown. They were written by Indigenous screenwriters that featured Indigenous people stories, cultures, and worldviews. It was a very meaningful, reflective, and important day. And as gratitude, want to thank all of the individuals who played a very important role in bringing that day forward. And that is my report for this month.
Thank you. And we have a motion to receive the interim superintendent's report as presented. Can I have a motion to approve or to receive, sorry? Moved by Trustee Duncan, seconded by Tom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Fossil fuel industry sponsored education materials. Deb.
All right, I will proceed with, there was a board motion made on April 25th, 2022, with regards to meeting with the members of the GVTA to discuss the appropriate use of fossil fuel industry-sponsored educational materials, including those produced by Fortis PC. The Associate Superintendent Harold Caldwell did meet with members of the Joint Committee on Curriculum Implementation on April 14th, and as part of their discussion, which is around the implementation of curriculum, was the motion. And at that time, the GVTA chair for the Pro-D committee had let Mr. Caldwell know that the GVTA had tabled the motion not to use the Fortis BC curriculum. And subsequent to that meeting on the 14th, the motion to not use Fortis BC curriculum was passed. Moving forward, though, it is important, I think, that we spend some time as we look at regulations and update them, that we spend time looking at the regulation 6161.1, which is the learning resources for classroom use. This regulation, while it was updated in revised in 2019, that was primarily around ensuring that gender neutral language was used, and it did not include other revisions. There's some parts of that regulation that do need updating. And so again, as we work through some of the regulations, I would recommend, or I will be spending time looking at that. And at that same time, we'll look at it through the lens also of the current LEAs, as well as the Urban People's House Indigenous Advisory TOR and the upcoming Métis Education Agreement, and also spend time with that regulation in discussion with JCCI as well. So we're mindful of the collective agreement, Article F23, with regards to professional autonomy. So I think it's moving more than moving past and including more curriculum with industry-sponsored pieces.
Very good. Thank you for that, Deb. Any questions or comments on that report? Trustee Whitaker?
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to thank Superintendent Whitten for the report, and as well for, you know, reiterating the importance of looking at these policies. This was not a one-off. It was not just about Fortis. I don't think it was a good example. And additionally, you know, just thank you for having this motion passed, you know, a week or so after you'd already had those conversations, and coming back again. So just thank you for that repeated loop that we put you through.
Okay, thank you. Any other, oh, sorry, Trustee Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, thank you very much to the superintendent and staff for addressing this so quickly in collaboration with the GVTA, but I also want to acknowledge the leadership that the GVTA has shown in passing the motion and committing not to use the resources in the classroom. So I just want to really a shout out to their GVTA for showing leadership on that. Thank you.
Indeed, it was a full court press. That was very good. Okay, so any other comments on that? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to C 2022-2023 Board of Education and Standing Committee meeting dates. Superintendent, back to you.
Yes, so you will see on page 98 the proposed dates for the Board of Education meetings, the Operations Policy and Planning Committee meetings, and Ed Policy and Directions meetings, and the accompanying recommended motion for that as a calendar for next year.
We have a
Care, but I also
you keep muting on and off, Trustee Whitaker. I'm sorry.
I can move it, and I also have just a quick question.
Okay, so the Board of Education of School District 61 approved the 2022-2023 Board of Education and Standing Committee meeting dates. Moved by Trustee Whitaker. Can I have a seconder, please? Seconded by Trustee Duncan. Okay, Trustee Whitaker.
Okay, so my question doesn't have a lot to do with that calendar, but does have to do with our school calendar. And it was, I don't know why, but sent to me by a parent. Is September 30th a holiday for the school district? Yes, it is. Okay, that's a big clarification for me. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question on, oh, sorry.
It's Orange Shirt Day. That's the holiday.
No.
In September.
But that's the stat day, right? It's not our day. Like it's not a pro D, it's a stat day, right? Okay.
Yes, it is a stat. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so approve the 2022-23 Board of Education and Standing Committee meeting dates. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you, everybody. D, Elementary Strings Report. Deb, back to you.
Thank you. So you will see starting on page 99, 8 pages of a memo, and I will spend just a little bit of time going through that. So first of all, the purpose of the memo was to provide an overview of the current elementary strings program that is in existence in the Victoria School District. The memo also provided board bylaws, policies, and regulations that pertain to the proposed recommendations that are found at the end of this memo. as well as some information around the schools that participated or are currently receiving additional staffing, some of which are Community Link, South Park, and Quadra receive additional funds through Community Link, and the rest are listed in the memo. It is important to note also that the schools currently receiving the funding are not necessarily geographically represented across the district. So just made mention of the school names there so you can see where they exist in the city. Also gave a explanation of what Community Link funding or how that's derived. There are 8 elementary schools that receive Community Link funding. And as I mentioned, 2 of them also receive the elementary strings funding. At the bottom of the memo on page 99, you will see the BC Arts Education Curriculum that is written for kindergarten through grade 5. That does include a general arts program, as well as the 4 core discipline-specific programs of dance, drama, music, and visual arts. And the next page is the historical staffing view of the 16 schools. To note, the Torquay staffing is built within the Gordon Head Middle School staffing, so you won't see what staffing they receive on that. And the addition, so at 2021-22, you'll see at the bottom the total elementary string staffing is 1.548. That does not include the 0.118 in prep or the 0.141 in travel, which is added to a total of 1.807, just to make sure we're consistent on the numbers as they seem to be represented differently. Also want to speak to the Amos proposal, and just you can see there in the memo what Amos stands for, the Advocacy for Music in Schools, and it is a subcommittee of BCPAC. It is a not-for-profit organization, but it's not a registered charity and therefore is not able to provide a charitable tax receipt to the donors. The proposal that we received from Amos was to maintain the elementary strings program as per the staffing allocation and delivery for what was this year into next year, so a status quo. And as we heard already this evening from Karen, that there's several donors, including one larger donor, and I think it has been named, so if I'm not incorrect, correct that. And then you'll also see that should a wage increase occur for staffing, they've agreed to be open to addressing the shortfall after the May 31st, 2021, by either increasing the donation or reducing the status quo staffing allocation. And further to that, within the memo, you will see the 6 different bylaws, policies, or regulations that pertain to this discussion or potentially pertain. And the blue font was supposed to be visually easier to follow along. You'll also see the red is live links that takes you to the full policy, reg, or bylaw. And to close, there are 2 different motions, each of which have supports and considerations for the board. The first motion better represents an opportunity for all elementary schools in the district to receive some additional staffing for a strings program, while trying to address the inequity in having 16 schools receive the staffing, as would be if it were status quo, as well as it tries to address the service to all grade 5s within the school district. We expect or currently have approximately 1,503 grade 5 students for next year. And that recommended motion would put the staffing throughout the school district, elementary schools. And the second motion follows the board's budget determinations, which occurred in April. And also to note, as the budget was passed, included an $800,000 additional allocation to music in middle schools, and the secondary staffing for music maintained status quo. Sorry, the first one also had a program review. So that is the end of the motion, or the end of the memo highlights.
Okay, trustees, how do we want to deal with this? We have two motions that are recommended, a main and an alternative. I've got Jordan and then trustee Duncan. So I'll go to Jordan first and then trustee Duncan.
Thanks, and thank you to the superintendent for putting together all of this information. I really appreciate the memo, and thanks especially to Ms. Kwan and I know you had a whole team of people supporting you all along the way. So thank you so much for all of the effort you've put in to this. I know it's probably taken a lot of energy, both physically and emotionally. So I just really want to express my gratitude. I would like to start off by moving the first motion, recommended motion.
So the recommended motion, including both the 208-18 to 1,503 grade 5 students in 28 schools to be determined, and then the review of the strings program, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and I assume, given that they're put together, that we'll just consider them together.
I'm going to consider them as one. Yeah, we'll consider them as one. So can I dispense with reading, trustees? Is that okay? All right, so we have that motion moved. Do I have a seconder for that
I just want to say one last thing. Well, I guess we can have a seconder, and then maybe I can motivate a little
Yeah,
more.
you can motivate after we get our seconder. So trustee Duncan is second. So Jordan, I'll go to you. Go ahead.
I just, in addition to expressing all of my gratitude for all the effort and energy that's gone into this, and for bringing forward, transparently all the source. I also just wanted to really thank the Amos for in your presentation tonight, really focusing on that piece of making sure that this gets to all of our students. And I think that's been a real challenge with this program all along, is that we've not been able to get it to all the students. And so this really gives us an opportunity to figure out a way to do that as we look at the program as a whole and how we can make it sustainable moving forward, which I think is what we all want. So yeah, I'm happy that we're here. I gotta say, I never doubt the power of parents, but it did seem like a pretty steep hill to climb.
There we go. I'll take myself off mute. Thank you, Jordan. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I wonder, Chair, if we can kind of relax our rules of debate and just include the one member of the stakeholder around our table, Karen Kwan, in our discussions and our deliberations. I think she can offer some valuable insight. So either we can move into a committee of the whole potentially, or just
You're welcome to move a motion to go into committee of the whole if you'd like. I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, so we have a motion to go into committee of the whole, which is fine when a motion is on the floor, because it's allowing us to move into a committee of the whole to discuss that motion. So the motion is moved that we go into committee of the whole. Do I have a seconder? Second by Angie. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Okay, we're in committee of the whole. Trustee Duncan, did you have a follow-up, or I guess an initial point? It wasn't even a follow-up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you to everybody. Thank you to Karen and all the parents who've worked so hard, all the generous donors who've really stepped forward in a short amount of time to support the continuation of the program, the superintendent for going to the effort to bring us an alternative, to do the research and make it easy for us to digest. And so much appreciated. I appreciated the blue text. I found it easy to follow, so thank you. So I'm really heartened by the direction that we're moving in here. There is a couple of things that I'd like to see amended in recognition of the fact that my understanding is that the donations are specifically for providing elementary strings programming. And so in light of that, I think the motion is great, with the exception of we would need to remove or alternative music program, because the funding is being earmarked for strings. That doesn't mean that through the programming review or the program review, we can't look at alternative music programs. I think that's a really great idea and a lofty ideal. And I hope that the review comes back with some ideas about alternative music programs at the elementary level. And then, so in addition to removing or alternative music program in light of the donations being for strings, the only other thing that I think we need to address is adding the words inside or outside. So it to be offered.
So sorry, Trustee Duncan, I'm going to just step on your toes a bit here. Those, if we can do these as two separate, because they are. I was just waiting to hear what the next piece was, and this is going in a couple places.
Understandable.
So,
yeah, that's fine. So yeah, so we'll let my colleagues comment on the first amendment then.
Yeah, so an amendment has not been moved or seconded yet, and I would like it not to be just yet, because before we do, I just want to hear from staff, from Deb specifically, and hopefully Karen. Deb can speak to the alternate music program and why that's here, and how that found its way into this motion, because I think that would be helpful for trustees and the public to understand why that's here, given the context of strings. I'm sure there's a reason that this is here. So Deb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Painter. The reason that it is in there, although I do understand the requirements of Amos, is as we look at some of the bylaws and policies and regulations, I was trying to remember which one it was, but it did refer to the principal having voice in the programming. So that's why that was added as well.
Your hand, Trustee Whitaker. Let's just give the superintendent a moment.
I think you can, I'll find it in a minute, but
sure,
it is, yeah, just policy 1325.2 fundraising. Principals should be given maximum discretionary powers and be held accountable for their decisions. In making their decisions, principals should have the support of their parents' committee. So that's a reference to that. But
okay, no, that's clear. Karen, your hand went up, and then I want to go to Trustee Whitaker.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Trustee Duncan has already said, is that, Amos by no means has anything against alternative music programs. And I really think that that's something that should be a topic when we do a program review. But for this specific purpose, that's what our fundraising has been specifically targeted for. So these funds would be used for elementary strings only for the next year.
Hey, Trustee Whitaker.
Thanks. And I just really wanted to thank Deb for her comments about, the principled autonomy. And I think there's ways to strengthen that within the motion. And I think that is important, that it is about each school choosing. I mean, if the principal doesn't and the school community continues to not want strings, then they certainly aren't going to have it forced upon them. So anyway, just speaking to how I do really value that autonomy is there, but it is a choice. It's either going to, you just can't fundraise for one thing and then spend it on something else, right? So it'll be a choice that principals will have to make, whether they want strings, and if they want an alternate music program, it's just going to have to come from our money.
Thank you, Trustee Whitaker. Was there Elaine? And then Trustee Duncan.
Thanks. The other point that I think Trustee Duncan brought up, and I'd like Deb to comment on it, was to be offered outside of the school day. So
sorry.
That's the next motion.
Yeah, that's going to be the next one. Yeah, I'm trying to keep those separate. Sorry, Elaine.
Oh, sorry. Okay. If you're trying to keep them separate, part of the rationale of what Superintendent has put together is to trying to provide equity in how we fund our schools, which is, like, for me, it's never been about music. It's been about certain schools getting additional funding over, my video's not on, sorry. Certain schools getting funding over other schools. So it's never been for me about music per se. It could have been science or math or whatever. So if it's not divided equitably, we're back to the same point that we were before. And I see that the funder also has a caveat saying it must be used for elementary strings. So I'm in a little bit of a dilemma here, because if it's not going to be divided equitably, because a school chooses not to have strings, then how is that helping me with equitable distribution? And it's always been, as it was alluded to before, even 20 years ago, it was an east-west split in the district, and it continues to be, with the exception of 3 schools, an east-west split. And that's always bothered me, that the students on the west side of town, like I say, with the exception of 3 schools, have not been offered strings for, I'm not sure what the reason has been, but we're back to the same thing that happened 20 years ago. And it's very disheartening.
Thanks, Elaine. For my part, I'm just looking at myself on the list. For my part, I largely agree. My issue with this proposal from the outset has been around transparency and equity. The transparency piece has been solved for me tonight, at which I'm very happy that it has been, because now I know, I mean, I can certainly see through the GoFundMe where a lot of the money is coming from, but we've also had a report tonight through Amos, where the 2 fundraisers were Flandia and I think it was Patrick McNally, if my memory serves me well. That's good. Those were things that I needed to know in order to have a educated vote on this. The equity part, if the alternative music program is removed, does not get resolved, because the challenge that we continue to have with this program was that it was being inequitably provided in the district, and some schools were able to access funding to provide strings. Other schools were not. They either were not wanting it or were choosing to not have it, but if they were choosing to not have it, then there wasn't an application of funding that could be provided for some kind of alternative music programming. If we go back to where we are right now, which, I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the board with respect to this specific piece, but we end back up where we started when this was a challenge for me to begin with. Was we have an inequitable program that has existed in its current state for 16, 17 years. I understand the program is old, but in its current state, it has been there for 16 or 17 years. And I think, you know, in order for me to feel comfortable supporting this tremendous fundraising effort, I would need to be able to know that the funding can be applied to all 28 schools, either for the maintenance and continuation of strings for the next year with the elementary strings review, or that some kind of alternative program could be utilized in another school. That's what equity is about. It's about giving people what they need. So that's my concern by removing this alternative music program piece, is that it would essentially make this motion mean that funding would be streamed only back to those 16 schools, and I don't know if I could vote for it. So in any event, that's where I sit. Karen, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to reiterate that, you know, we see this as a step forward. We're not saying that we're solving, you know, all the world's issues in one go. Basically, what we're looking for is we're looking at equitably offering this program to every school, every elementary school that wants it next year. And with that in mind, we will run a program review, as Superintendent Whitten has suggested. And from there, there's a possibility that we can perhaps look at ways that we can, you know, provide this program in a different way, or perhaps look at partnerships, or, you know, Torquay works with the middle school. Like there's lots of opportunities there. And I think by saying no, you're saying no to those opportunities. I think what it is here is that at this point, we're offering all schools the chance to do elementary strings and also have that discussion on what's working and what's not.
Okay. On the amendment to strike alternative music program, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I guess what I would point out to folks is that what would stay in the motion is the line that says, as determined by each principal in consultation with the respective staff committee and the school's parent advisory council. So to me, that is really cementing the idea that principals should have maximum autonomy, and that they should work, as they always do, with their staff committee and with their parent advisory council as appropriate to, you know, make those determinations about what is best for their individual school. I disagree that removing or alternative music program would create inequities. And in this case, really what the motion, and I believe what Superintendent Whitten is proposing, is that the strings program would be offered equally to those schools who want to take advantage of that. So there is a choice, involved. Some schools may not wish to have a strings program. They might want to do something else. And the fact that there isn't the same programming at every school is not in and of itself inequitable. I think what becomes an inequity is when there is a barrier to access. And what's being proposed here is removing the barrier to access. It's offering strings to any of the 28 elementary schools that wish to have it. And it's in the way that it's drafted, it's really ensuring that principals, staff committees, and parent advisory councils are allowed to exercise that local autonomy at the school-based level to decide what's best for the school. And I know that through the review process, there's going to be some wonderful opportunities to come up with some new strategies and solutions for how music can look moving forward. And I have no doubt that there's some wonderful alternatives that we should support as a board moving forward. But tonight, I think the question here before us is whether or not opening up the opportunity to have strings with the funding that's been raised for strings addresses to the satisfaction of the board the concerns around equity, and I think it does.
Okay, Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. I just wanted to
Angie.
I just wanted to speak to the comments and concerns around inequity. For me, I feel, equity has many different meanings, and, removing those barriers, having it available, and giving the principals the autonomy to choose what is best for their school culture, I think is appropriate. It's not treating one school differently. And I think that we really need to be careful when we think that every school has to be treated exactly the same, because we're setting ourselves up to do exactly the same thing all the time. I mean, how can we use that as the way that we're going to move forward? But we're not going to put robotics into a school because we have the opportunity, because the other schools don't have robotics. I don't think that's the way we would be making decisions. We want to keep moving forward. We can do this. This school would have this program and this one wouldn't, and it's no different. We would have a school that might have a robotics club when one that doesn't, because one school has the ability and the autonomy to do it, and then hopefully they build up such a great program that the other schools have got the capital funding to put that into their facility. So I just would caution us to say that everything has to be absolutely equitable, by dollars each particular school. Every school has the rights and the autonomy as a PAC, as a school community, with staff and principals to determine what they want. And I think it's important that we acknowledge and continue to support that type of difference between schools.
Okay, I've got Angie next.
Thanks. I just really want to put my support for this. I think Nicole summed it up really well in her last little speech about, just equity is removing barriers. I think this system, the elementary strings program, is an excellent program. It has been inequitable. There's definitely work to be done. This is a stopgap measure to make sure that we're not losing something while we figure out how we're going to make it better. And I think this is a really excellent opportunity to offer it to those schools that haven't had it. And if they want it, great. And if not, then hopefully within the year and doing the review of the program, we can figure out whether everybody wants this, whether people want something alternate. But I think in the spirit of the donations as they're being given, they are for strings. I'm happy to support that they're just for strings for this year. And then hopefully moving forward, we can make this an even better program.
Can I ask Karen, in your opinion, if the alternative music program just 3 words. If those 3 words stayed in the motion, would it make the proposal untenable from the perspective of your donors?
Well, as I said, when I was speaking earlier tonight, really the donors want a guarantee that the music that they are donating is only for elementary strings. So, you know, if we keep an alternative program in this motion, those funds would have to come from district funds. So if the district were able to find funds for those alternative programs, then by all means, you could keep that in there, but you might have to add some additional wording for that. But, you know, at this point, our fundraising was specifically focused because that was the amount of money that we had from the budget that happened this year. And so that's what we fundraised towards. That was specifically what we were focused on for this fundraising effort.
And as our own policies and bylaws say, because this is what you are raising the money for, this is necessarily what it would have to go to. So even if we pass the motion with this wording in, you're saying it would still just go to the strings portion. Okay. No, I mean, that clarifies. Jordan, I thought I saw your hand go up. Sorry.
Yeah, just on the point of around equity, because really what we're talking about is that access and removing the barriers, not, you know, mandating that everybody have the exact same cookie cutter program, but I think they should all have access, because it's not like all of these schools have started from the same place in choosing whether they want these programs. There are barriers that exist and have existed historically, and you can see that really clearly in the spread of where the schools with string programs exist. So I don't think we can pretend that there hasn't been inequities. You know, and again, not using equity as equal, like they're, you know, not every school starting at the same place. So for me, what's really important is it's being offered to all of the schools and that we're supporting that. And, you know, that might mean that the program needs to shift a little bit, right? Like we need to give a little to get a little. And so that might look like some of the programs that are multiple times a week are scaled back a little bit so that instruction can happen at other schools. And I hope that there's like an awareness that that shift could happen. But to me, that is sort of the equity piece. I guess where I'm struggling at this point is, so right now we have a motion to remove or alternative music program.
Yeah, that's the only motion we're discussing right now. We'll go to the inside outside part next, which I think will also be a longer conversation. But that's why I wanted to split, although Trustee Duncan was ambitious.
So I guess what I wanted to clarify though is that it doesn't mean the exact strings program that we've had previously, like, because if you offer it out, it would have to change. So it might be strings, but string, like ukulele is strings, and so things are different. So I'm just wondering, like, how much thought has been put, like, are we really thinking of has that been operationalized in terms of what the commitment looks like? And these are sort of the details that I've been wanting to make sure that we're really clear so that there isn't any misunderstanding. This is a large sum of money from very generous donors. And so I don't want us to be put in a position where we've got schools that would really like to do, you know, ukulele. It's a super accessible way to get kids into strings. And then there's a feeling that that was a bait and switch or something like that from Amos or the folks who've spent all this time raising the money. So just trying to think broadly around, if we take out alternative music program, which I can support because I know that this is about strings, how are we defining strings? And is there a degree of choice in there for the school community, the PAC, to make that decision in consultation with their principal, which is what I hope there is that flexibility for, because I think any way that we can get kids into playing you know, strings instruments through this process is a win for SD61 and a win for music. But obviously it's not, if you open it up to 28 schools, it's going to look different. And so just trying to make sure that we're really clear about that and that there's an opportunity to discuss that.
I don't know if there's a response from Karen or staff on that. I think I really, really want to thank Jordan for laying that out, because that has also been something I have thought about a lot. Karen?
Yeah, I think strings is considered orchestral strings. So it's an instrumental program, and so stringed instruments are not strings. So a ukulele and a guitar would be a stringed instrument, but it's not strings. So I think it's just defining both of those definitely.
Okay, I'm going to go to Elaine and then Trustee Duncan, and I want to make sure if staff have any time they want to jump in, they can jump in as well. But Elaine and then Trustee Duncan.
Thanks. Following on Jordan's comments too, maybe I'd like to ask Karen, has your community talked about the fact that if the amount is then divided between 28 schools, because they all jumped on the board with strings, and it was previously 16 schools, the fact that you would get half as much instruction? Has your community talked about that? Because that would be another issue that Jordan alluded to, but I'll just spell it out. You would get half the amount of instruction because you're spreading the same money over all of the schools.
Yeah, as I said in my presentation, Amos definitely supports providing this equitably. I think I had a great conversation with Superintendent Whitten actually at the beginning of this week, and we did talk a little bit about that piece and what that would look like. And I think the staff has a number of different options and alternatives on how that would look depending on how many schools need it. And I think until we know how many schools, or I shouldn't say need it, how many schools want it, that would determine how that program would look. But it definitely, we do realize that would look differently next year. However, looking at whether there's no strings program being provided to grade 5 students next year, as opposed to perhaps maybe one class every week or week and a half less, I think, I can say, as a parent, I would prefer to have classes offered rather than no classes at all.
And if I could do a follow-up to
Elaine, you went on mute.
Yeah, sorry. If I could do a follow-up to Deb then, since if you take out the alternative program piece, then you aren't dividing the staffing and giving the additional staffing, which is $7,450 some odd dollars to each per school, which is a chunk of money to do programming. If you have to then wait until the schools have had their meetings and talked about strings and decided if they're going to go forward with strings, what is the logistics of the staffing piece to before school starts and before the end of the year? And is there time to do all of that? Because if you can't do alternative programming, you have to then only staff and divide the money between the string schools.
Deb?
Yep, Chair. So just I'll try and answer several things. First of all, as it stands now, we have a commitment between the Human Resources and GVTA to do staffing as quickly as we can for what comes if this motion is carried or alternative motion. It is a lot of work for HR, and I'm sure a lot of work for many people to get this in place, including the principals who would be tasked right away with identifying this possibility. Simply put, there's 0.001199 for each student in the district in grade 5 if we divide up that FTE between the 1,503 students. So we would be looking at trying to put approximately 0.028 into each grade 5 class. So it really depends on how large the school is as to how much staffing they would get. And that's the purpose of equally distributing this across the district. And again, if a school chose not to do orchestral strings, then that amount would be distributed amongst the schools that chose to do it, as I see the motion reading.
Mm-hmm.
I think that addressed those questions.
Yeah,
And,
I think so. Thanks, Deb. Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, just a quick comment. It's an aside really, but just reminding folks that we also do provide some funding for ukuleles. Just as an aside, I just want to remind folks we do have some funding for that.
Okay, I think we've gone around on this quite a bit. It looks like we're ready to call the question on this. So the question is on striking alternative music program from the recommended motion. So if you vote in favor, you vote in favor of striking those three words from, actually, sorry, it would be participate in a strings, sorry, it would actually be or alternative music that you'd be striking. So again, we're looking at striking the or alternative music from the motion. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? And the motion carries with Elaine and Tom opposed and the balance in favor. So that motion is amended. Trustee Duncan, you're next. Kick at the can. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought we might as well move right into it. So the other amendment would be adding after offered inside or out. So it would read inside or is what we're adding. And it would read to be offered inside or outside of the school day.
Okay,
And
so that's the motion. So before we go, so do we have a seconder? Trustee Whitaker. Okay, Trustee Duncan, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to kick us off, really what I'm hoping to achieve with this amendment is to allow for, again, some flexibility and to acknowledge that, you know, there's only so many times outside of the timetable available. And if we're going to realistically provide strings to all 28 elementary schools, we would need to offer times both inside and outside the timetable. And then also appreciating that, you know, there are only so many music teachers, you know, out there and available to recruit to provide this programming. And so we would need to offer each elementary school the option of times both inside and outside the timetable. So I'm hoping this amendment would achieve that.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Whitaker. And then I've got Jordan and Elaine.
Thank you, and thank you for the amendment. I really like that. Well, this acknowledges the big elephant, right? Like the inside and outside. Obviously, there is in some situations, a strong desire to have it outside of the timetable. So for me, I've given this a lot of thought and I've heard two different sides. I completely understand and appreciate the challenge of half of a class going to strings and the other half not. And the challenge that this can present within a classroom for the teacher to come up with, you know, what are you going to do with the kids that are left behind? You can't go flying forward because others are going to miss out. And I do remember when I was a child and strings was offered in the school in Nanaimo, you weren't allowed to take strings unless you had a certain level of accomplishment within the class. It was a reward. And I'm happy that this is not part of this, but it can be, right? And I think that it's up to each school to be deciding, you know, does it work for their school and the way that they do their scheduling to have it within the timetable? Is there some really great thing that they're doing in that time with those kids that stay behind that is beneficial? I have heard the positive stories, how some kids really enjoy, like this is their time to get special care and attention when the other kids go to strings. And I've heard the opposite of my experience, where it was a negative thing that some kids got to go and they didn't get to go, and that it has held up the teacher. So I think that the schools that have created, you know, that great thing that they're doing while strings is happening, they should be allowed to still do that. And maybe they, you know, for them, it works to have it within the timetable. But I also, with that, I acknowledge how it can be difficult to do that during the day. It's about, you know, who's covering the class and prep time and all the rest of that. That I think that having the opportunity outside allows for more hours within the day for the kids to access it. It's, you know, it's still a wonderful opportunity. We have got kids in high school and middle schools that are coming before and after school for instruction, for all sorts of different programs. So I think that this is the best of both worlds. I really like that it gives that autonomy to every school for what works for them. I think that is really key to the education system, and where everything is, you know, the equitable, or we're trying to, it feels often like we're trying to take away that individualism of our schools. And this does the exact opposite. And that's what I really like about it. So I hope that we'll get that support. It puts the decision-making in the hands of the parents, the students, the teachers, and the principal. And I really appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to, oh, sorry, I saw Deb raise her hand, and then I think I had Elaine and Jordan, I think, or Jordan and Elaine. I'm not sure. Deb.
Yes, so just as we know right now, we do have some that occurs within the day and some that occurs outside of the day. So I don't see that as a problem. The one thing I do want to be clear on is staffing has already occurred. And so some of the, if not all of the teachers who taught strings this year have been placed. And so just, we cannot obviously put teachers into positions. So when these vacancies, if these vacancies go up, we have to be mindful that they're for teachers to apply for, not for us to put in. So I would like clarity if this does go forward as to what occurs if we can't fill a vacancy.
Okay, Elaine and then Jordan.
Well, I was wondering why it was part of Superintendent's recommended motion, and that explains it because they've already been placed. So that was the rationale why you place it outside. So my comment is inside or outside. I think we're going to go back to the way it's been offered this year, as was just mentioned by Anne, that Trustee Whitaker, that most people already have a system in place and they're going to go back to the way it was. So I know that we haven't gotten back to down to the review part, but I need some clarification as to what a complete review of the elementary strings program means. So if we're now have taken alternative music out and we're taking out of the school or adding in or out of the school day, to me, it's going to look very much exactly as it's looked this year. And I'm just wondering, it's deja vu, here we go again, what a review is expected to accomplish over the next year. A review to say, we can't offer it during the day, it has to be in prep time, because for me, it's an issue of extra dollars for schools that is not in the budget for a specific program that is not within the ministry funding. So, you know, we break it all down like that. Yes, it's music, but that's not my issue. It's not the issue that it's music. It's the issue of the funding and the inequities. So maybe the superintendent can give me an idea of what the review would be expected to accomplish after this motion goes ahead, if it does.
I think that would have to come through a discussion with the board as to what the scope of the review would entail, but one of them would be around sustainability and how this could move forward without a reliance on one-time funding or funding from outside.
Okay, Jordan.
So we're
On
just
the, so we're on the amendment to add inside or outside.
Okay, so for me, this is really an issue of equity and removing barriers to participation. As a kid, I was not a kid who could do anything that happened before or after school because I was limited in how I could get there. And then I also had responsibilities for younger siblings. And so there wasn't a parent who was able to go and come back or drop off or pick up one kid and do the other. And I missed out on a lot of things. And I know that there's lots of kids in our district who are missing out on things as well. So for me, this isn't so much about providing choice to parents, because I know that there are parents out there who don't have the choice to have their kid participate in that way. So for me, in the spirit of this, allowing us the gift of kind of a reset for this program, I don't want to get emotional, but for me, I would be really sad if we didn't keep it in a space of being equitable, so that we're allowing kids to access it. And doing that within the bells, that's when kids can do it, especially the kids who might not otherwise ever have the opportunity to pick up this kind of instrument and get the kind of quality instruction that our amazing teachers provide. So I'm sure this is probably a thing that would be covered in a review, and we look at what are the barriers to participation and how do we increase that and make sure the little kids who with a single parent with 2 jobs and that they get access to it. But in the meantime, I would just really urge my colleagues to consider that keeping it within the school day is truly an issue of equity. Thank you.
So sorry, Jordan, just being clear, you're supporting keeping the current language or adding?
Yeah,
sorry.
I can't support the amendment because I think it's going to exclude kids.
Thank you.
And
Just
in
wanted to be
fact, even in the schools that already have strings that's outside of the classroom, I bet that if we move it within the day, that we're going to see kids take it that wouldn't have otherwise been able to. It'll, I would imagine, improve uptake.
So just a point of clarification.
Sorry, hold on. So the first hand that went up was Karen's, and I want to go to Karen first, then I'll go to Trustee Duncan, and then Trustee Whitaker if the point hasn't been clarified.
Apologies, I'm sorry. I probably did take the words out of everyone's mouth. I think here, point of clarification, Jordan, is that actually it only says outside right now, and that's what we're trying to move towards. So I think this motion actually, unless you want to amend it further and take outside completely out and put inside in, but right now it says only outside of the time to, of the bell. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Jordan, did you want to respond?
I see the confusion. I think it should be inside the school day, but I can see that if what the recommendation is outside of the school day, it's probably a scheduling issue, I would imagine. So maybe the superintendent can clarify that. I still really think that it needs to be consistently within the bells in order for it to be equitable. That said, I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I just know that if it were outside, there's a lot of kids who won't be able to participate.
Okay, Deb.
I think in order to spread this across the district, we need to be flexible with inside and outside, and sometimes lunchtime also is a time for it. So I think we need to be as flexible as we can, but I do recognize the challenges with having it before or after school.
So I'm just going to put myself on the list. Chair's prerogative. So I'm going to support the motion because I think at this point we have and we are trying to be as flexible as we can to honor the work that parents have done, fundraising has done, understanding that this if it does put us in the twilight zone, where we're back where we were 2 or 3 months ago with the exact same program, that's actually what parents are trying to do for the most part, to preserve what existed. If we get it in extra schools, that's a bonus. But the point here is to try to maintain for 1 year, which is 1 year, for all the challenges that we'll have if this does come back in, but bringing in the inside or outside portion allows for maximum flexibility to try to make this work within the next school year while this review goes on, to try to find a way to make it sustainable. And by the way, that will be on us as a board to come together and determine, okay, now what does this review look like? So our work is not done. But for me, allowing the flexibility honors the work that the parents have done, that the community has done, to try to preserve something that very clearly the community wants preserved, including the 2 fundraising groups and all the people who've donated. So anyways, that's I'm going to support adding this piece because I think it allows us maximal opportunity to be flexible, maintain this, and try to find a permanent solution. So I will go to Trustee Duncan next.
Yeah, I think it's been hopefully clarified that the intention of the amendment was in fact to bring the option of having strings music delivered inside the timetable as well as outside. And I think in addition to providing flexibility and hopefully opening up the possibility of other elementary schools taking part, and so removing some of the barriers that might be related to scheduling. It also, I think, just acknowledges the reality of trying to schedule, this program at all of the elementary schools should they wish to have it. So, yeah, hopefully colleagues are and understand the need for the amendment, and we'll support it.
Okay, I think we can move forward on this amendment. So I'm going to call the question. And again, the question is to add the words inside or to complete the sentence, music program to be offered inside or outside of the school day. So it's add inside or. All those in favor of adding inside or, please signify. All those opposed. Abstentions. So I have Elaine abstaining and Tom opposed and the balance in favor. Do we have any more amendments to the motion? Okay, so no more amendments. Let's just bring us back to center. We still have this full motion in front of us, including the part around the review. Oh, Elaine, sorry, I see your hand up. Go ahead, Elaine, sorry.
So I'd like to know, to complete the review, the second part of the motion, I need more information in that. I think it needs to say more than it says there. Either a date for the review to be completed, or that it's coming to the board to see what the review will entail, or that there's a committee set up or something. It's just, I need more nuts and bolts and meats and potatoes in that part of it.
So maybe we can
amend that.
Maybe we can have, before we do, let's have the superintendent just weigh in on thoughts around the wording that was placed here. And if there were any preconceptions, I suppose, around timing for this before we start amending it.
I think the timing would need to occur prior to the budget of next year. So it would be a first half of the year review. I think that the scope of the review would have to include the barriers to access, the frequency that makes sense for a program, the grade level that makes sense, as well as accessibility, the instruments, and the sustainability as we move forward. How would this program be offered through a prep or a teacher that we're not paying on top of the current funding?
Okay, so I think we had some hands go up with amendments. Trustee Whitaker, I think I saw you first, so I'm going to go to you first, and then Trustee Duncan.
Thanks, and I appreciate Superintendent Winnan giving the, what you feel will be in that. I don't think that we need to do that tonight. I think the critical piece is that, which I would amend, that complete the review during the, well, I think it should complete and present the report of the review to the board prior to passing the budget. Right, it's critical that it be done within that time. So perhaps we say by January, seems to be right before our deliberations start getting going. We start creating that structure in February. So I think that maybe the report needs to come back by January of 2023.
So by January 2023 board meeting?
Yeah. Well, actually, no, I think it should, let's do ourselves a favor and send it to committee first, as we should.
Oh, sure. Yes, of course. No, you're right. Nope, that's the better place. No, I hear you. So probably operations then, I would say at this point.
You know what, I'm actually going to call it on ed policy. This is an educational issue. It's not an operation. So I would say
Okay.
to ed.
Sure. So the motion then, just the amendment is direct superintendent to complete a review by January 2023 ed policy. We can maybe fix the wording, or complete the review to present to January 2023 ed policy. Okay. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Okay, Trustee Duncan. Elaine, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I would just like somehow in there, maybe she can, and Trustee Whitaker can take it as a friendly amendment. You're going to have a new board. You're going to have a brand new board, and who knows who's going to be on the board. I would like to see it say a report with recommendations, so that a new board is given some guidelines as to what is possible, what is plausible, because they're going to be all over the map about, you know, depending on who's on the board. So I think it needs to contain recommendations.
Thank you, Trustee Lender. It's a very good offering there. And I absolutely, and I think it's important that we do continually remember there will be a new board. So we need to be a little bit better at our dotting I's and crossing T's. So thank you for that.
I think it's helping the new board out, as opposed to throwing them up in the air and saying, here, pick something.
Yeah, throwing them to the sharks. Yeah, for sure. Because that'll be a challenging one. And they need recommendations, especially a brand new board. Okay, so just to staff have a good idea of what the new, I know we haven't really worded it well. Do we have a good idea of what this motion amendment is, Deb? Yeah, we're good. And Kim? Yeah, okay. Okay, any discussion on the amendment? Trustee Duncan, sorry, go ahead.
Can we just confirm that the entire board's okay with the friendly amendment? I think it's a great idea.
I didn't see any objections, so I think, are there objections to the friendly? I don't think so. Okay, no, we're good. Okay, so seeing nothing further, I'll call a question on the amendment. All those in favor, please signify. And that carries unanimously. So we're back to the main motion as amended. And I think we all know what the amendments are, but for a reminder, it's to strike or alternative music, to include inside or outside, and then to add a review of the elementary strings program with recommendations during the 2022-2023 school year by January Ed Policy 2023, and staff will do a much better job of finding the wording for that than I will. I thought I saw a hand up. Tom, go ahead, please.
Sure. Slap me if I talk too long.
No, not at all.
Thank you. I would be a lot happier with this if the money had been raised for music in elementary schools. I would be a lot happier. And that's partly because elementary schools are mandated to offer music, and they do offer music. And by and large, they do a very, very good job of it. The place where this would have been really helpful would have been in middle schools, where you could offer a program outside the, you know, if it were funded by somebody other than the district. The conundrums there are a lot of conundrums here, which doesn't mean I won't support the motion, but there are a lot of questions that are being raised here. And that a future board, the next board, will have to deal with. There are cultural issues. You know, playing an orchestral instrument doesn't fit with every family or with every culture. The other thing I think is that there's absolutely no way that next year's budget has room to add money for music, and we all know that. We have a 3-year budget, and we know where we have to get to, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. If that money were available, I would want to be putting that money into our strategic plan, because we need to be supporting students in basic reading, literacy, and numeracy. These are the areas, if you talk to any principal, any elementary school principal, and you said, oh, I've got some money for you, that's where it would go. So, as I said, I mean, I applaud Karen and the group for raising the money. I think it's fantastic. I love strings. I mean, I for years I went to every single music program in the district, until people thought I was a bit of a scoundrel because I voted the wrong way in the budget. But nonetheless, these are conundrums, and we're passing them on to the next board. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Not much more to say, but appreciate your strong points. I think they're important, and I think everybody watching and listening needs to recognize and understand that we move into next year in a deficit position already, and that's just the reality of an underfunded education system. I saw Trustee Leonard, and then I saw Karen and Trustee Whitaker. So Elaine, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Tom has said. So it really, I find it very difficult to vote against a motion like this because of the donation aspect and because of all the parents that have contributed to it. But I speak from experience that because the money is there for another year, people will get complacent and think that it will be there for years to come and won't think about how to do things differently. So I'm really imploring the music community and the teachers and the staffs out there to think about doing it within a school budget, because we can't afford to take that kind of money out of schools that don't have the money for reading programs. And especially on the west side of town, they're the ones that need them for their learners and the strategic plan, as Tom has said, for early literacy, numeracy, that type of thing. And yes, strings are lovely and music is wonderful. I'm a musician. I love music. I sing all the time, play lots of instruments, but not at the expense of something else. And so that's where I've been struggling for many years to see these dollars being taken and put into a program that is enriching and lovely, but it's not the basics. And so that's where I really struggle. As Tom has said, it could go a long way to support our strat plan in a lot of the schools. So I won't be supporting the motion at this time, and that's because I hope I'm proved wrong, and I hope next year we can figure out how to offer it different at no cost to the district so that everybody's on a level playing field across the district.
Thanks, Elaine. Karen?
Thanks. I think really what I'd love to say here is that I don't think anyone disagrees with, the issues that Mr. Ferris and Ms. Leonard are bringing up. I mean, obviously there are a lot of struggles that, I think every program is going to have this. I don't think any program is perfect. I think everything is always a work in progress. We can always make it better. And so I think really what we're looking at this point is that, we're looking at keeping this going while we have that relevant conversation. I appreciate the fact that you remind parents out there that, this conversation has to happen. I also, I want to remind you that I think there's a lot of overlap between subjects. And I think, when you take math and when you take science and when you take language arts and you put them into silos, that's when the issues come here. And I want to remind you that music education helps in all those areas. And we really need to start looking at, as I said when I gave my presentation earlier, is out of the box, innovative, critical thinkers, and moving students to that kind of thinking. And music does that. Music uses all parts of the brain. It helps people become better, or it helps students become better readers, helps students become better mathematicians, helps with all of the STEM. These are things that we need to start looking at how we can do this better. How can we make our programs better? Maybe music education comes into some of these other subject areas. But I think for now, we're not necessarily saying that, this needs to go back into the district budget next year. What we're saying is that we need to be open to these conversations. Maybe there's a partner out there, just like we've partnered with, the TERFs or whatever it is, maybe there's a way to do this program in a different way. But unless we have the time to make that conversation and make sure that our students are still getting, the benefits of a program, that's where we're at. And just one last thing about, really having an issue with this being strings. Well, unfortunately, we don't have a budget or an amount for what music education would look like. We have an amount for what strings cost, right? So that's actually where that fundraising came from. So in order to complete a fundraising round this time around, we fundraised for strings. And so that's why we specifically focused on that area. If we can come up with a cost for, an alternative program or something like that, perhaps that's something we can look at in the future, but that's really why this was done the way it was.
Thanks, Karen. I think I'm going to wrap debate at this point. I think we've all, oh, sorry, Trustee Whitaker, did you have, sorry.
I have not spoken to the motion yet.
Trustee Whitaker, my apologies. It is late. Wherever it is for you, it's getting close to 2 o'clock for me. So anyways, go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. Because this motion has weighed heavily on me for quite some time now. And I mean, first, I guess I just really need to put out there congratulations and a huge thank you to Amos. As a parent advocate, I'm telling you, I never doubted you for a minute. And when I heard in 2 weeks that you had raised the money, I was like, well, of course they did. They're parents, because that's the way parents are when it comes to something that they are key for their students. There is nothing that will stand in their way. And every time that it's done again, I'm just always so proud of you. But I also want to acknowledge that there is that challenge of paying for staffing through a donation. Of course, it's not somewhere that we want to be. Policy 3451 does say that we encourage donations by the district. Of course, we want to stay away from paying for staff, but times are changing in that the funding is clearly lacking. I'm aware of several other districts within the province who are actually going outside for donations to keep programs running when the funding stops for mental health programs. And that's critical. That's how they're keeping their mental health staff within their school. So there are other precedences. I was really happy to hear from Barb Eady, who taught my daughter cello, about the time in the year 2000 when once again strings was saved by a private donation. So there is precedence for that. And then I guess I really found myself doing some more research, and I went to the BCSDA and I went to what do trustees do? And it says that trustees engage their communities in building and maintaining a school system that reflects local priorities, their values and expectations. School trustees listen to their communities, and it ends ... Boards are directly accountable to the people they serve, which is the parents and the students and our whole community. And what I am hearing from parents and from students and from teachers, and I'm seeing in the fact that in 2 weeks they have raised $200,000, is we've made a mistake. We made a mistake when we passed that budget and we cut strings. We didn't listen. They want strings. And we are accountable to our population and to our people to provide them what they want. I understand that it makes all of us feel uncomfortable. I completely understand that the government should be funding us more, but I also am very aware and very committed to the fact that it's my job as a trustee to listen to my community. And I could not hear them any stronger when that they've gone, hey, you know what? You didn't quite get that piece right on the budget. So you know what? Rather than getting upset about that, we're going to solve it. And they've come up with these funds in 2 weeks. Imagine what else they could do. And I do think that this is a one-time funding, because I think if this board continues to listen to our community, that next year we probably will come forward with something very different for our elementary schools for music, and it will support strings, it will probably support drumming, and it will support other instruments. And each school will probably have just a different opportunity. And you know what? What will be important is that every one of our schools, elementary schools, will be looking at music, and it'll be part of what is integrated in every grade 5 classroom in such a way that we will build more connectedness and that joy of coming to school. I heard Trustee Ferris say that principals, if they were given the money, would put that money to reading, writing, and arithmetic. And I'm sorry, I haven't talked to a principal yet where that would be their first expenditure. They are looking to expend money in areas where kids are feeling connected to their school, connected to their learning, and to improve their mental well-being. Math and reading, yes, they're important. But if the kids are not connected to school and to their learning, doesn't matter. We've already lost them. So for me, obviously, I'm going to support this motion. It's been a bit of a journey and a ride. I thank Amos for taking me on this journey. And yeah, I've heard you. We made a mistake, and I hope we don't do it next year. So thank you.
All right. Any further comments or debate? We're still in committee of the whole, so if anyone else feels like they want to comment, they can. Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion as amended. All of those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries with Elaine and Tom opposed. So we'll now go to trustee questions. Sorry, hold on, Kim.
You're in committee right now. You have to move back into the board and pass the committee's recommended motion in the board meeting.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So can we please move out of committee of the whole? I need a motion moved by Jordan, seconded by Nicole. All those in favor? And that's carried. So now we have to move the motion together. Sorry. Thanks, Kim. The motion has already been moved and seconded. Kim, we don't need to move and seconded again, do we? It's already on the floor.
Well, you're amended now, so
I think we can, because it's already an amended motion that's been put forward by committee.
It's a recommendation from committee, so you can accept the recommendation from committee and forego the.
Okay, great. So the motion as recommended. All those in favor? And opposed? Okay, the motion carries with Elaine and Tom opposed. Karen, thank you for all your work, and thank you to Amos parents for all their work as well. We'll move forward with our continued work as a board to move this project forward together. But you should be very proud. This was incredible. Okay, so sorry, my computer just went weird on me. Okay, there we go. E2, trustee questions. I'm sorry, trustees. Trustee questions. Are there any trustee questions for the superintendent? Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. I am being contacted by mayors because our lawns are not being mowed. I am well aware of the no mow May, but it has been raining and sunny and raining and growing and growing and growing. So I'm just looking for an update to be able to reply to some of our other partners. What are we doing about these fields and not mowing them? I do know as well, you know, I know that Chuck's got a big load on, and that there's been a lot of pulling of the fields maintenance people into custodial. But anyway, I'm just looking for an answer because I am getting emails from counselors and mayors on this topic, as well as parents.
Deb?
Yeah, I think we are as well, and I think that Justin and Chuck are responding as quickly as they can. And I know that hiring for summer crew was done, and they still had vacancies. So, like most of Canada, we're without full staffing. So I think they're trying to get out there and mow them, but I'm aware of some. I think they have one full crew that gets to all 48 schools. So I think they're working as quickly as they can.
Thanks, Deb. And I just want to make a point that if trustees are receiving emails and phone calls from mayors and councilors, that all trustees should be included in those emails. We, as trustees, for the public, you may not know, we're all assigned to be liaisons with different municipalities. And so each of us have a duty to ensure that we're being connected with those. So my hope would be that if any individual trustee is receiving emails and phone calls from multiple mayors and multiple councils from different communities, that we try to loop in our respective colleagues so that we all know what's being said. I know around this table before, trustees have commented that we should all have the same information. So if we can all work together to make sure we have that information, that would be very helpful.
So just to clarify what I received, I forwarded them to the superintendent and to Chuck Morris.
Yes, and all trustees in the future. Thank you. Any other trustee questions? Seeing and hearing none, we'll go to the Secretary Treasurer's report, monthly report.
My report is attached to the agenda for information and any questions.
Okay, and we have a motion that the Board of Education of School District number 61 receive the Secretary Treasurer's report as presented. Can I have a motion to receive? Moved by Jordan, seconded by Angie. Any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. So we have B, Shoreline Middle School Local Capital Appropriation. Secretary Treasurer.
So we have growing enrollment at Shoreline Middle School projected for next year, which is an added division. Within the school itself, it does not have space to create another classroom. And so within the school, we are proposing to renovate the multi-purpose room to create a new classroom for the division. And that comes with a cost, of course. We've taken some significant risk with the budget in terms of our surplus. And so we're proposing to the board that it consider allocating local capital money to create this division to attend to the 22-23 enrollment at Shoreline Middle School.
Okay, we have a recommended motion that the Board of Education of School District 61 approve the expenditure of up to $250,000 from local capital reserve to create classroom space for a new 2022-2023 division of Shoreline Middle School. Can I have a motion, please? Moved by Lane, seconded by Angie. Any discussion? Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. So we have been discussing Shoreline since my previous term, back and forth about doing a full seismic and renovation on the school. And now we're talking about just doing one classroom. So are we to then assume that we're not going to do the fuller, full-on upgrade of Shoreline? Has Shoreline fallen victim to the museum?
No, Shoreline's not fallen victim to the museum. So we know that we have ongoing discussions around the best option for Craig Flower and Shoreline in order to make all the students in both those schools safe, whether it be seismic upgrade at one, both, or some other combination. And we know that we have ongoing discussions with our rights holders in terms of how to move forward with that. So it is very much at the forefront of our mind, but we recognize that conversations are very important and that we want to move forward in a good way. And so while you won't see Shoreline on this capital plan, you will see it definitely on a future capital plan as we conclude or pick up those conversations. So it's not fallen victim to the ministry or funding. It's just a matter of timing and having those good conversations in a good way to move forward.
And so if I can just just follow up
Yeah,
then.
go ahead,
So,
Trustee Whitaker, you can follow up.
yeah, thank you, Ryan. So will this, where obviously capacity is an issue at Shoreline, we're seeing one division now, and it sounds like it's going to be at least another 5 years till we're looking at even coming up with proposals to the ministry for Shoreline. So are we going to see the need for another classroom in the near future within that 5 years after we do this division, or will this keep us in a good place for, you know, foreseeably 10 years by the time we've done a build?
I do not have the answer to that question this evening, but perhaps Colin does. I'm not sure. I didn't bring the enrollment projections with me.
Yeah, I guess where I'm really going to is I appreciate that there's the space with the multi-purpose room, but it leaves me wondering when I know that one of our learning classrooms, I think that's what we're calling them, that they're usually at a cost about 250,000 if could be.
A learning studio, a portable?
Yeah, learning studio, thank you.
That was
Aren't they
much higher price than modifying the multi-purpose room.
So what, can you just remind me then? Because for some reason in my head, I had a $250,000 value for like $250,000 for a learning studio. What is the cost of one of those?
I think the cost of building the learning studio, you're in the ballpark, but it's the permitting and placement of it that increases it exponentially. So I think we were looking between $400,000 and $600,000 in placing that portable if we were to go that route at this particular site.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, thank you for that. I guess my bigger question is have we looked at future enrollment? Would it be a better cost saving for us over the long term to put in that extra effort and have a learning studio and then keep the multi-purpose room available for other options if we suddenly needed to have another room?
Yeah,
I know it's a higher price.
The higher price was a factor in terms of local capital. We've also taken significant risk with our local capital, and our land deals are hopefully going to close. But I think that in terms of cost, if we need to add another division or if this added classroom won't carry us into future projections, then we'll need to revisit it again. But I would say that this is the most economical at this time. Given that we've used local capital allocations or appropriations in our budget as well.
Okay, any trustees with other comments? Yes, Trustee Duncan.
Yeah, I just want to lend some further support for, I think, what Trustee Whitaker's trying to highlight. And obviously, I know our Secretary Treasurer, of course, knows this, but as a board, I mean, it's critically important that we do everything we can to prioritize discussions with rights holders over what to do at Shoreline and Craigflower. And I think this issue before us tonight about increased enrollment, not enough space, very, very high costs associated with just turning a room into a classroom highlights the urgency with which we need to prioritize those discussions. So I hope that we can, keep this in the forefront of our mind for a further discussion at a future board meeting. But I understand that the staff are putting forward a motion with a proposal that they believe is the most economical in light of our other financial commitments at the moment. And so I will support it. And thank you to the Secretary Treasurer for providing some further context.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Oh, sorry,
Wait,
Trustee
I'm
Whitaker.
sorry. No, I think Superintendent Whitten is trying to put up her hand. I'd like to hear from her.
Okay, Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, with regards to future enrollment growth, I believe Deputy Superintendent Colin Roberts can respond.
Shoreline, according to our projections, is very, very close to reaching its maximum that we expect to see in the next 10 to 15 years. Its capacity is 425. Its enrollment for next year is about 385. And it's the requirement to meet class size and composition language that has required the additional classroom. So, I do believe that by this one act, we will be in a good situation to make sure that Shoreline can accommodate its population for the coming years.
Trustee Whitaker.
Thank you. And sorry to belabor this. I'm obviously going on the more expensive side. I will support the motion, but I'm just hoping that there will be discussions with the rights holders. My concern is not just that there's enough classrooms, but it's really important, especially in middle school, that there are other spaces for the students to go. And my concern is that we are taking away that multi-purpose space as well, which detracts from other learning opportunities. That anyway, I just hope that there will be further discussions on that. And if it means I don't know, I'm actually leaning towards the more expensive learning studio, just so that there are those other opportunities for students to have places to congregate, to gather, to do their performances, to play drums, to, throw all their gear after they're out on the water, whatever it is. So that's just my thought, that maybe there'll be more conversations. And if, this is great for now to get us through, but maybe in the future, we're talking about it again. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call I'm not going to call the question. I'm going to move on the motion. So all of those in favor of approving the expenditure of up to $250,000, please signify. And that's unanimous. Question period, we have one. This is a question that was referred to previously in the meeting from Jonathan Farber. I don't know if this was the one from the 25th. Yes, or from the 755 that was referred to, but it's been discovered. So the question is, in the April financial monthly report, the Secretary Treasurer disclosed that the school district has accumulated $470,424 in legal costs since the start of this year. Were any of these costs related to legal action taken against the district? And if so, what process under policy 3546 was used to approve the decision to defend the district in court at the expense of the district's learning community? Question mark. What percentage of the cost of the Greater Victoria School District of the $460,424 accumulated so far are due to expenses or payments made to Harris & Company LLP between January 1st, 2022 and May 30th, 2022? So legal instructions and legal information are disclosed in camera. Legal costs, for those who are paying it, are watching, legal costs are reported in camera to the board every month. In-camera items are not disclosed publicly, and legal matters are in camera and are not disclosed publicly. So that's the answer to that question. Public disclosure of in-camera items. G1, record of in-camera Board of Education meeting, April 25th, 2022. And G2, record of special in-camera Board of Education meeting, May 24th, 2022. New business, notice of motions, elementary strings programming for 2022-23, Trustee Whitaker.
Pardon?
It's your motion, H1.
Well, is that not mute now?
Well, the motion was still put forward, so you can withdraw it if you'd like.
Oh yeah, no, it's just doesn't matter anymore, right?
So yeah, do you want to withdraw it? Sorry,
Yeah, it was just a placeholder to make sure we had the conversation.
Okay, so then it's withdrawn. No notice of motions, adjournment. Can I have a motion, please?
Whoa, stop.
Moved by
Stop.
Angie.
No, excuse me. You just ran really fast through all those last pieces, sorry, which confused me. And I just wanted to go to our section 72 reports. And I just need to ask the question, the March 8th minutes, when will these be in a section 72 report or provided? I know it's been asked on a couple of occasions, but I would just like to have clarification when the March 8th minutes will be provided to the board so that we can actually disclose the section 72 on that.
Staff?
I believe those minutes are coming through in camera at some future date when that issue is discussed in camera.
Can I have clarification as to why it's taking so long for these minutes to come forward?
Is this regarding the current legal issue that is before the courts? If it is, we'll not
Well,
discuss it here.
specifically.
If it is, we're not. If it
specifically,
is,
It's not,
we're not.
it's not,
Okay,
it's
so
not.
Trustee
I
Whitaker,
would
please be
specifically
specific.
like to know when it's going to be told and reported out to the public that I was expelled from the meeting. So I would like those minutes to come
Okay, so
forward
we have
very
now
quickly.
breached confidentiality, so I'm now going to continue on with this meeting of adjournment. Can I please have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Elaine, seconded by Angie. All those in favor? Those opposed?